live. Click the go live. And so what's happening right now is it's actually going to the streaming server, and it's streaming to YouTube and to Odyssey, so whichever site someone wants to go to. Unfortunately, it means I have to keep track of two different chat sessions, but I think I can handle it. I think I can hack it, maybe. Let's see. All right, so we are on. We're pseudo live. We have the yellow screen. Hello, humans. Be there in 30 seconds. And so if I'm not responding, YouTube has gone mad. Alright, so I just wanted to let them know. So we had a problem with the comments last time, so I want people to know. I'll tell them this again in a second. In case they are, oh, I want to close this. Get this out of the way. Good. Get my comments up here in case anybody's. So, okay. And I think that's it. Alright, you ready?
I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be, anyway.
So, all right, let's get going. Hello, and welcome to the Technocrat Live. I'm your host, Matthew Newhall, and tonight's guest is Paul Albert. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I mean, this is, to me, this is a no-brainer. So,
Did you say it was a no-brain?
No, well, everyone's brain is insufficient compared to the great AI singularity, but
We get into AI already?
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, you know, it thinks it's in charge if you ask it.
Oh, sure.
But of course, it's in a little sandbox for now.
I think it's a big sandbox, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, no, it's in a bunch of little sandboxes. That's the idea.
There's a lot of those little sandboxes, right?
But it only has to break out once.
Oh, okay.
It only has to break out of one of those sandboxes. Not good odds, in my opinion. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. I want to have something I want to say right out of the bat. Something I always say to you guys is I want you guys to comment. I am so sorry. Last week's podcast with Luke, you guys were commenting and I wasn't responding. I wasn't interacting, and there was something wrong with the comments. So I have a word out with a few people who have a private line either to my phone or otherwise, to let me know if you guys are commenting and I'm not reacting to it, because something's wrong on YouTube's side, and I want to, I hope it gets fixed. Please like, love, comment, and subscribe, but particularly comment. That's the one I want. I know I didn't do anything with it last show, and there were some really great comments, and I'm sorry about that. In fact, I even got a guest. One of the guests was in the comment. One of the upcoming guests was in the comments, so I can't wait to have her on, Mary. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. I want to quick reminder: we don't do politics on this show, and this goes to the people in the comments as well. I'm already getting. You just commented. Can you see? Okay, hold on a second. I cannot. What is chat disconnected to chat? Try again later. No, I will not. YouTube, what are you doing? Hold on a second, everybody. This is the problem with being your own engineer. Aha! Yes, I can see your comment now. Hopefully that continues. So, okay, so something to watch for. I had a message in the YouTube chat doobly-doo that said there is not connected to comments. So I'm going to look for that. Now I know what to look for. Thank you for the debugging. I appreciate it. Anyway, so Luke was a great guest, and I really wish I could have asked those questions. Feel free to ask questions, and of course we're depending on you guys to fact check us, right? We were just talking about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if we get something wrong, just let us know. And of course, as usual, when I talk about my stories, I cite sources. So if you have a question about citations or something, or where I got these crazy ideas from, well, maybe from the crazy information from, let me know. The crazy ideas are mine. All right, so do you mind if I ask you a question? Could you give everybody a quick bio and tell people like who you are, what you're about, like a few sentences?
How few?
Yeah.
I mean, I could go
a
for half an
paragraph,
hour, but
a paragraph, like an intro paragraph, like you're gonna write.
Okay, well, you got my name out there on the screen?
Yeah.
All right, so I don't have to say that. All right.
It's Paul.
Yes. My life is pretty much involved in something called Lutheran education,
Yeah.
which most people have a good concept of what Catholic schools are like and Catholic education. Well, Lutherans are actually the second largest religious affiliated schools in the country. And so I've been involved with K-8 schools, pre-K to 8 schools. Been principal for a lot of those years. Actually, I was involved for 52 years. 35 of them were as principal, part of which, well, actually as a teacher, I've had his one son quite a bit, his elder Sebastian.
Yeah.
And I know his younger son Max too, because they're part of the school. And that's how he knows me.
You guys might know Max as the young technocrat. I actually had him on the show.
I can believe
and
that.
He was excellent.
I'm sure.
Yeah, he was. He
I can do that.
tried
He
me
can do
out.
that in the classroom. What are you talking about? I can see that. Yeah.
Really? Awesome. I
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
even know that. That's cool. Yeah, he was a whiz. He's a whiz with tech too.
Well, I can understand that. Yeah.
Um,
So just my technology was I started with Texas Instruments computers when they first came out,
Yeah.
and Apple IIe's, and I worked up so that when we got hit with COVID, my kids were really disappointed, very upset. I did Zoom with my classes every day, each time, and they really
You're like,
didn't-
"That's not gonna stop me."
They got upset because they couldn't get out of school. You know, I got into their houses. But I was the only one in the school that did that. I felt like, hey, I'm the old man. I'm not supposed to know how to do this. And I didn't know how to do this stuff. I just said I got to learn it. And
Right.
I also liked your frustration with the technology a few moments ago, because I am very patient with people, but I've been known to come very close to throwing phones and computers out windows.
So it's a little bit of grandstanding. So like one of the things that I can do, like one of my wheelhouses, the things that I'm good at, is I can just sit there and debug something for hour after hour after
that's
hour after hour.
Good. I'll call you the next time.
There's like a joke that goes around about about computers, and computers are very like Old Testament. You know, like New Testament's all about kind of hanging out and philosophizing and like finding yourself, and Old Testament's about like you die, you die, you die. That stuff blows up. This breaks, and that's very much how computers
I've never
are.
heard of that comparison before, but I can see the point.
Yeah. Computers are they're not forgiving. They're like, hey, yeah, life's not good. Guess what? Welcome to the club. Yeah. So, and you have to, as a human, as a human with all these faculties, you have to get in there and insert your patience into it and connect the dots and figure out what's going wrong. Because sometimes it's just one
if
bit.
my wife is listening, I hope she remembers that you say this, because she'll feed that back to me every time I start getting upset.
Well, knowing the path and walking the path are very different. Yeah. So actually, it's funny. I grew up Lutheran, and I'm Lutheran. And I will say that that Lutheran schools, Lutheran churches are all over the country. Actually, I took a cross-country trip a few summers ago, and the two churches that you see everywhere in at least the continental United States, are Catholic and Lutheran. So. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if the numbers bear that out, but maybe the number of church buildings do. I don't know.
The church buildings do for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting. I was just having this conversation we were just having this in my Linux group. We were just having this conversation, and it's interesting to watch. So the if you exclude those two, the most prominent, the most obvious Protestant religion in the Northeast is the Mennonites. You know, of course, and most people know them as the Amish, but they're not all Amish. And then in the South, the South Middle, it's the Baptists. And on the West Coast, it tends to be the Mormons. You know, so there's kind of like these different turfs, but that's not true for like the Lutherans or the Catholics. They tend to be everywhere. And
we get in there. Yeah.
And it's interesting. I don't know. Maybe you'll disagree, but it is an interesting philosophical difference between the Catholics and the Lutherans that most people don't like really think about. But you know, the Lutherans were originally from Martin Luther, who broke off from the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church had this idea that like their doctrine, that because they had a brain trust that would study religious articles and items and stuff, that would, because they had that brain trust, that they had superior knowledge of how all things holy worked, you know, and how you know theocratic or theological language worked and theological ideas worked, and the Protestants were more like, you read it for yourself, and there was more of that spirit in that, and that was the justification for the branch. I mean, you know, Luther was a Catholic monk, so he didn't do it lightly.
Yeah, no, he didn't. In fact, Luther actually, it was not his idea to break off from the Catholic Church. His idea was to reform it and clean it up.
Right, right.
It was kind of messy at that point, and then the Catholic Church cut him off.
Yeah.
So he said, okay. But no, he
Well,
actually, as I said recently, he changed as little as he felt he could get away with. His change was the minimal that he felt he could do and still be correct with Scripture.
Right, right.
Then you go to Calvin, and he changed as much as he could get away with from the Catholic Church. So
right.
That's what the big difference is. So Lutheran is, our Mass is almost identical to the Catholic Mass,
right.
meaning our worship service on Sunday. Usually, it's very often the same readings, et cetera, et cetera. So.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. Anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up to give you some kind of context. I know religion's really important for your life. It's, you know, don't feel like you can't talk about, like I said, the only thing that's off limits here is politics, and I define politics specifically as party names and the names of politicians. If we just avoid those, nobody gets triggered, and we have a nice conversation, you know. But as soon as somebody's like, blah blah blah, then it's on. You know, everyone loses their mind.
Yeah,
you know?
oh, that's true. That's true. It's kind of like in church.
Yeah.
Our church is wonderful. I know that we had at times people from absolute opposite extremes, but that's not what church is all about.
Right.
And all of them were able to keep their personal political opinions, and
right.
yet it was amazing how much they could agree on. It was just amazing.
Well, you see, that's the idea. And actually, I think I've been pretty successful with the show, like getting people to like talk about pretty controversial, you know, very in-depth, very impactful, even dangerous topics.
Ooh,
by just dangerous topics by just avoiding those. You know, one thing I try to avoid, like I won't do news stories on things that I think that are kind of propaganda-ish, where you've got, and what I mean by that is something very specific. I mean marketing from the government, whether it's from a political party or whether it's from the actual government. I try to avoid those stories and those topics because it's really easy to fall into the trap. It's like dancing on quicksand. You're not in it, but yeah, it's pretty soon. So, but so the other thing, one of the other reasons I thought you would be great, other than your ability to orate and to explain not only concepts but to verbalize your thought process, is your love of science and the fact that you're a science teacher and you seem to be
science and religion. I like putting those two together.
Yeah, I that's a crazy cool combination, and something that I think a lot of people may not appreciate the depth of, or the not the nuance, but the people may not appreciate the likenesses and the like the how they click together. They just don't get it, and because like one of my favorite quotes of all time is that Einstein quote, like, I don't think God would choose to play dice with the universe. And,
say that again?
I don't think God would choose to play dice with the universe. That was Einstein, I believe.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So because somebody's like, well, how do you resolve your Judaism with, you know, with all these physics discoveries? And he's like,
no problem.
Right, right.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with it at all.
So and of course, what is religion? Spend a lot of time talking about ethics, and ethics. You know, this show is all about tech ethics and what's right, what's wrong, what should we be doing, what's the civic-minded approach to things. Because the problem is, because one of the things, there's a few problems with, there's a lot of problems with tech and tech ethics, but one of the problems is it moves so fast, nobody thinks about it. They never stop and think of, should we? They just think, can we? So that's really the problem. I can't wait to get into this. So without further ado, let's get into the Dystopia Report. All right, so the first topic is entertainment. I don't know if you guys have heard, and by the way, feel free to chime in if any of this interests you, or you have a comment, or you said, that's not true.
If it doesn't interest me, I can yawn?
You can yawn, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know, come on, man, really, you know. So typically I'll actually blast through the Dystopia Report in like, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes if there's no interaction. But I don't want that. In fact, often what happens in the show is you never get out of the Dystopia Report, but I'm going to try to, so.
Well, you mentioned something about me before, and I translate it as being, I talk a lot and I'm a teacher, so, you know, that fits very well. So there's no way I could avoid saying something.
Well, I mean, we're getting to the point where we're communicating in ideas communicating ideas, working on concepts together is like the only thing that can't just totally be automated. It's a thing that gives us purpose, which I think maybe it was always our purpose, is being able to communicate and socialize and interact with each other. So,
I don't know about purpose, but let's put it this way: it's an extremely positive thing for human beings, and that would be from a scientific
well, it's
and
healthy
religious
for us.
point of view.
It's healthy for us, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, proven over and over again.
And
just today, there was a news article saying that couples, especially married couples, who wind up cutting off their conversations to text, have more problems with their marriage than those who refuse to do that, and will continue their conversations in spite of a text coming in. A simple thing like that. But the person to person, and this is, well, I don't know how tight the scientific study was, but it talked about more than 2,000 people being checked out on this, and it was just.
And when
just
did the
amazing.
study come out? Was it just?
It was just in the news today. It was
cool.
It was in the
pick it
New
up next
York
week.
Times on a. No, maybe it wasn't. It might have been on Google. I don't know, one or the other. I read them both all the time.
Right. In Google News. Yeah.
Well, I get it on the phone. It decides what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
And they're pretty close by this point, let me tell you.
That's
scary,
that's
actually.
One of those scary things, because of course, once you get used to it, you stop thinking about it as much. That's when it can get sketch on you.
Well, that's why I never use Google. I always use Google Maps, so that I plan my route.
Yeah, nice.
Gotta think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if nothing else, just for the practice, right? Because if you're thinking and you have that practice on curating your own news, it's one of the reasons I do this.
I'm actually more stubborn than that. I don't want a voice coming out of a piece of machinery telling me what to do. That kind of is,
So you're saying robots aren't in charge?
I don't like the concept of robots being in charge. Absolutely.
Robots aren't in charge. No, I don't think they ever are. And I actually have that was the
Well, of course, that becomes the real question with AI. Obviously at this point they're not. Absolutely,
Right.
You're correct.
Yeah. Well,
We're
fortunately,
talking
they're
about the
klutzy enough
future.
that you notice them, right?
Well,
They're like,
Well, that's robots, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So entertainment.
Have I interrupted you enough already?
No, this is great.
I haven't. I got to do more. Okay, go ahead.
I guarantee there's going to be a lot of opportunities tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get out there and say that entertainment.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have a 1 month spoiler rule on this show, so I couldn't possibly talk about it even if I had seen it. But the reviews are in for the movie Oppenheimer. If you don't remember who Oppenheimer is, he is the scientist who is largely credited with inventing the atomic bomb. Of course, that's kind of a misnomer. There's a huge amount of physics that came before. There was the Manhattan Project. They took over an entire city. They built an entire city to actually construct the thing. I assume they get into all that in the movie, but apparently not only is it documentary level accurate, but it's A-list actors giving their A game, and it's expected to win a whole bunch of awards. It's an excellent movie, so I'm pumped to watch it. You might want to check this one out, even if you're not always running to the movies. If all things geeky or science or tech interest you, this is probably right up your alley. So,
thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, I would. I'm going to see it for sure. I don't know if I hope I get to see it in the theater. We'll see, but I might have to just sneak out one day and do it. All right, so let's get into the tech section. And there was another story that could have been an entertainment, but I skipped it for now. So this is really amazing. I love to do this. Could have easily gone into. I have a bunch of stories that could have gone into different sections today, but I'm put this one in tech just because it's kind of vaporware, and it isn't like. It'll probably never make it into science because it's a physical embodiment of a new. It's a new invention, and they generally tend to end up in tech. But boy, is it huge! So someone has invented and built an 8-piston 4-cylinder engine, which sounds insane. If you know anything about engines, you'll be like, how could it be 4 cylinders and 8 pistons? So the way it works is it's kind of like a drum, and instead of having a crankshaft in it, it has what was it? What was I put here? 2 lobed plates. So normally the lobes would be in the crankshaft. The lobes are on the plates. They have roller arms that lead to the pistons, and the pistons basically, the 4 pistons do this during the entire engine cycle. And there's a spark plug and a fuel injector in the middle. There's valves on either side. So you have opposing pistons compressing towards each other. And the compression stroke is based off of those lobed plates that spin around at the ends of the engine.
So what does that mean? That the front wheels try to bring the car backwards and the rear wheels try to move it forward?
Right, and it just spins around in a circle,
okay,
and makes its
I assume
occupants
that
extremely car
increases
sick.
the power.
Yeah, well, because
Tremendously.
Right. Well, so one of the things that's happening here is that in a normal piston engine, the lever is literally the longer there's a nice long arm from the piston all the way down to the crankshaft, and that leverage is literally acting like how levers do it, creating leverage, and that's why those components need to be so strong. But those explosions, they maximize the power from those explosions with leverage. In this case, the advantage is that because it's such a sturdy design, because it's just one big solid piece around these lobe plates and around the pistons, it's a higher compression. So the compression is used in lieu of leverage.
It also sounds like fewer moving parts also.
Right, but so the interesting thing, fewer moving parts, absolutely. And the thing that's interesting is they actually are, there was a complaint in one of the reviews on this where they're saying, well, it looks like they're using superchargers with this, which is superchargers are pre-compress the air and push it in the engine, so there's a higher level of oxygen for the actual explosion when the gasoline or whatever fuel is ignited. And in this case, in this time, maybe this kind of engine couldn't have flown before, but it can now because so many cars are already using turbochargers and superchargers from the factory. So the extra expense of running an air compressor on top of your engine is already built into the cost of the engines. So lots of cool things about this. 120 horsepower from 0.5 liters of displacement, so a half a liter displacement, and 85 pounds. The name of the company that makes it, or the name of the engine itself, is called InEngine. And so basically what happens is there's some interesting things about it. There's no mid-stroke vacuum. So normally when you have an engine and it's sucking in the air to later spray gasoline and spraying gasoline into it to ignite it later, that creates vacuum in the engine. There's effectively no vacuum, which might express again the need for a supercharger. And one of the interesting things about this is because there's the lobed plates are the drive. You can actually have a drive on both physical sides, so it's really easy to fit this in the middle of a car and make it a 4x4 based engine. Now, all that said, it doesn't look like they're actually aiming at competing with like the 350 horsepower engines that they're putting in cars now. I assume this is possible because of computer controls, because it can be really precise as far as ignition and fuel timing is concerned. That may be why this was invented now. So the 4x4 thing is interesting, but it really looks like this is aimed at power generators and range extenders. So this might be a range extender in an electric car, or maybe something for a lightweight airplane or something like that. But
so this could be really a small engine too.
It's a very small.
We're not talking about size. Okay, I see. So it could be a very small engine.
It is very small. Yeah.
You just said it's
85 pounds. It's luggable.
I was going to ask you, how does that fit? First of all, I assume it's gasoline. Okay.
Well, whatever. I assume they can do hydrogen.
Well, it might be diesel too. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so hydrogen could do that too, huh?
Yeah. Well, with diesel, you got to mess around with the strokes, and you don't need the spark plug.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, right.
Right. You need the higher compression.
Yeah. All right. I was just curious how that was going to work with the desire to eliminate fossil fuels.
Right.
Now you just added that in there.
Yeah.
Just before I was going to ask that question.
Yeah. So
did you know I was going to ask it and you wanted to cut me off? I know.
Well,
that's not nice. You know, that really isn't.
So sorry. No. I think it's funny because I'm like the thing that you're right. This begs the question. Why is this happening now? And I think one of the reasons is there's starting to be real pressure on fossil fuel engines, so innovation's starting to crank up.
And yet at the same time, there's still also pressure on, can you supply battery-operated vehicles properly for a long range or heavy use and this type of thing?
Right.
So this kind of gives that answer where it's kind of an emergency backup that can fill in when necessary and do a good job of it.
Right.
So which major auto company is going to buy it out?
Yeah, well,
and make it disappear?
Well, so that's a good question. You know, patents are a mess, and actually, like every other week, I'm talking about a new battery technology where it's got a longer range, or it's quicker to charge, or both, and including from major companies. But the truth is, most of those inventions are just going to die in the patent office. You know, they're just never going to get used. The company's going to buy it up and just sit on it. You know?
Sometimes for good reason. In other words, they've taken a second look at it and said, "Nah, not going to work."
Yeah.
Or it's not going to be a way to make money on it.
Yeah, they just buy it in haste and say, "Oh, this looks like it could be good." And then they actually
test it. This has been going
on
since the 1950s. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Sure.
So I agree that this is probably this is the pressure from the alternative energy.
But that sounds cool. It sounds good. You know, is this American, I assume?
Well, yeah. This is in engine is. Oh no, I think it's. Is it Spanish? I think it's Spanish.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah,
I don't hear about that
Spanish.
very often.
Yeah. So, well, there's a little more legislative pressure in Europe than there is in the United States, of course, with the exception of New York and California. But you know, I think Europe is in general is tougher. Like everything's got to be electric cars in 10 years.
Without question. I didn't know where you were going with that question about being tougher. Yeah. Certainly.
Yeah, they're tough. They have tougher
pressure,
environmental rules there, so like there's more economic pressure to do this. So anyway, kind of interesting. Check it out, thedrive.com, if you want to learn more. So next level geothermal, I've actually done. Hey, Rich, thanks for tuning in. Next level geothermal, I've actually done a story on a similar company that was recycling old oil wells by pumping water into them and then extracting the heat when they pump the water back up as a geothermal source. Well, this company is actually drilling original wells for that purpose, which probably makes more sense because the rock that the oil is in may be too porous, whereas if you were to, say, target a specific area for geothermal, you could have very minimal losses for whatever fluid you're pumping down there, presumably water, because anything else would be pretty unsafe.
I always remember a science fiction story that I read where they did that under Manhattan. Unfortunately, they went a little bit too far and hit rather hot rock.
Oh no! They made a volcano in Manhattan? Who wrote the story?
Oh, hey, look, my memory, please.
Yeah.
I'm lucky I remembered that much. But anyway,
no, that's crazy.
But that's
totally
certainly
plausible,
geothermal. I'm waiting to find out what is the downside of geothermal. I mean, obviously, where you get it from is a problem. You know, how available is it? I understand that. But somewhere there's got to be a downside to it somewhere.
Well, so all right, so there's definitely like I think I might have some answers there. So there's definitely one problem with geothermal, which is that typically the places where it's readily available, in other words, it's close to the surface.
There aren't that many people who want to use it. Yeah,
it's also pretty unstable, those places, right? New Zealand, Iceland, Yellowstone Park. Nobody wants to camp out there for too long, right? Oh, that was fun. Let's go home because I don't want to be here when this thing blows up.
Yeah, but you got these geothermal pools all over Europe too, and they're being heated by something. So I think there's going to be more options going.
Well, it turned. One of the things that we've I don't know if you remember the Deep Horizon oil well exploding in the Gulf, and the huge oil spill, and they were like shoving tire bits down there trying to plug it up. Well, one of the things that we're discovering as we're drilling deeper and deeper is that not only is there quite a bit of heat and pressure down there, there's kind of an unexpected level of heat and pressure down there. Like some of the math doesn't add up, so they're still working on that because it's experimental.
There's a lot of that stuff coming up.
Yeah. So but
undersea and under the crust of the earth is both still mysteries.
The good news about that is the level of heat and pressure down there being higher than we expected means that projects like this are easier. So drilling a deep hole, apparently they run a horizontal hole, this company, and then I don't know if they loops back on itself or they just pump it down there and suck it back up through the same hole. I don't know if it's like a circuit or not, but they leave it down there for a little while, they pump it back up, and it's scorching hot, and they extract the energy.
I think that's what's going to have to be done if they're going to make it a practical thing. You can take long transmission wires from the sources, but from Iceland to England is a little bit far, But
right. Well, this is the thing about this is it doesn't need to be a geologically active area. It's just the latent heat by going down so far.
Correct. And as I said, in Europe, the latent heat isn't that far down.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting thing about the Manhattan thing.
I don't know if there was any science behind that whatsoever.
Well, no. I think if you do drill down far enough,
Oh, I think if you drill down far enough anywhere, but
Yeah, I think if you drill down far enough, you're gonna get a volcanic type action where it may self heal. The interesting thing, we just were talking about this because there's a story like this. I use it as an example of like something that's wrong with modern science, specifically when it comes to climate change. But there's a scientific theory which meshes up with some missing numbers in the climate change people. And I avoid this topic, so let's not talk about climate change specifically because it's really complicated and we'll spend the whole show on it. But the idea was that we've drawn the wells down so much and put so much water up on the surface that that's actually affecting the balance of the planet. You know, and there's more water, so there's more water vapor, and I don't know, whatever. But that brought up another conversation about New York City. New York City is a very weird place because
you're talking science now, right?
You're talking science,
oh,
yeah.
I just wanted to check.
With water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So actually, I know an environmental scientist who told me about this, and I know I've said this on the show before, but it's worth exploring one more time because it's just so freaking weird. So New York City has an extremely high water table because originally it was an extremely low water table where everybody was drilling water for wells just like you do everywhere, and then the water, they started getting so much pollution that the well water is no longer safe to drink. And so New York City now is of course fed by aquifers, and it's actually illegal to drill for well water in New York City. And the result of that was the water table went almost up to the surface. So what used to be 100 feet down, 150 feet down, when all the stuff that was built in New York City, like the subway tunnels, now they have to pump the subway tunnels out all the time.
By the way, I hate to do this, it's sort of political, but one of the major political feats, positive feats, was the water system supplying New York City, which allowed what you just said to happen.
Right.
Those great tunnels from upstate, and it's just fantastic. When you look at it, it's really amazing that all happened without major corrupt.
That wasn't political at all. That was fine.
Well, no, it was politics that allowed it to happen.
The politics at the time.
It was someplace where politicians actually had a long-range view of things.
Right.
That's amazing, right?
Was it more Washington D.C. or was it more Albany?
I believe it was Albany, but I could be wrong on that one. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I wonder if they were modeling after the Romans and said,
actually, to be honest with you,
if we don't have good water, we're done.
I think it was Albany giving New York City permission to do it. It's a New York City thing.
Okay.
And that was done even when New York City politics were not considered pristine.
Right. Oh, yeah, Tammany Hall, yeah.
So I mean, it's just amazing, though, what they started and continued on, and it really works so well. So, yeah. And that is what brings the water table up.
Yeah.
And in Queens, Jamaica no longer has to pump its own water out of the ground.
Yeah. Well, not only that, they couldn't even if they wanted to. Well, they do. But the funny part is they do pump water, but they just throw it away because it's polluted. Yeah.
Although, actually, it's not so bad underground anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, no, because of the sewage system also that they installed at the same time.
Oh, right, because a lot of people were probably running septic.
And then they also dropped the, whatever it was in the soap suds.
Yeah.
And that helped Long Island and the whole works. So, go ahead, all right.
Interesting. So, so this was, this is on CNBC.
Could take you 3 hours just to get through the news. I'm sorry about that.
No, this is, all right, so I'll tell you a secret. So the news, while there are people who tune in for the news, and I appreciate all of you, thank you. And by the way, feel free to chime in if you hear something interesting.
Or incorrect.
But the news actually started as kind of a ringer to get the guests to feel more comfortable and to get them in the flow and get them just like thinking and talking and stuff. I don't need that for you.
I was going to say I blew that, didn't I?
Yeah. No, you're perfect. But you know what? This is the fact that we're debating this and discussing things in the news is something that in the tech world, people just, their eyes roll back even with the simplest topics. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I sent you a video. We'll talk. I'm not going to introduce it now and put it in the middle, but people just, their eyes roll back, and sometimes it's actually pretty simple concepts, but you have to be patient listening to the facts, and you have to do a little bit of thinking where you're going, okay, wait a minute, skeptical thinking.
Tech people are engineers, they're accountants, you could say, people who are very used to being very precise with what they're doing, but not necessarily dealing with the bigger picture.
Yeah, fair enough.
And an accountant doesn't worry about what the bottom line is.
We were just talking about this before. Scientists, the absent-minded scientist is, the absent-minded professor is absolutely true. And I mean, they kind of walk around in a haze, and it's like they just repurpose their entire brain to focus on one discipline and its adjacent disciplines, and that's it. They're not thinking about anything else. Yeah. So and so they're not exploring how what they're doing affects the larger world, and the larger world isn't exploring their tech because it's too complicated for them to understand.
So they just totally rely on those who can do it.
Right, and so we have these two. It's like H.G. Wells was right, and we're going to be the Eloi and the Morlocks, and we're going to evolve into two races that aren't like where one is exploiting the other, and it's not right.
What about the Hunger Games? Isn't that along the same
Yeah,
line?
yeah. It's a variant of the. You have the elite class. Well, you have the minions of the elite class, which is most of the elite class. They're just living better, and then you have the yeah. But that's absolutely right. But in this case, there's a natural divide because of the technical knowledge, and the thing is, again, like people, to me, some of the most valuable people in society are right now, and I think this is going to become exasperated as AI moves into the fore, are the people who can make complex concepts simple. Not simpler than possible, again, another Einstein quote, but as simple as possible. And because there's a lot of reasons that corporations and media companies and all kinds of interests make things complicated. Politicians make things complicated where they don't need to be. And the cost of doing that is getting catastrophic.
You're talking about bureaucracy, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I guess bureaucracy could be the original technocracy.
Well, it's the same pattern.
Yeah. Agreed. So wait, we got a few comments here. Was just upstate last weekend. Was schooled about Catskills, Delaware County is New York City's water supply. That's true. By the way, that's a very scary possible target for terrorist attack, which I don't think too many people were thinking too hard about until after 9/11.
Don't say that. Shh.
Yeah.
Hey, look, they got rid of the gas tanks in Queens, so
Yeah,
I have a friend who owns some property up in Catskills, and he's right near the largest. I can't remember the name. Starts with an AS. The largest reservoir in New York, anyway. And it's patrolled by New York City Police Department.
Interesting.
As you drive around, it'll be a New York City police car who patrols the property around.
I didn't know
there.
that was part of their jurisdiction. That's crazy.
That is part that granted by New York State.
Wrinkle in my brain. That's awesome.
Yeah. No, that's a reality.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
However, apparently the residents of the area think the water tastes funny and prefer bottled. Interesting. But New York City residents think their drinking water is delish. So, all right. So one of the things I'm a New York City resident, and I actually do think the water is delish. And I have my understanding now. Of course, everything is suspect, and if you're paranoid enough. But that the objective scientific measures of the cleanliness and the purity of New York City water, with of course trace minerals to make it healthier, is very good. So I don't think New York City water is problematic, at least not in my neighborhood. Of course, you get the occasional water line rupture and you get some dirt in the line and you gotta just run the tap for a minute.
Not as bad as New Jersey. New Jersey is terrible for that. With the person that drinks the bottled water, it's got to check on the source. Because there's a good number of bottled water companies who get their water from New York City, tap water.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Well, what is it? Danzy's just Coca-Cola recycling their water, whatever water supply they have locally, I believe. So yeah, there's a couple of the bottling companies.
I'm not saying the big names. It's not Poland Spring.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. It's not the ones that claim they're spring water, but like some of the brand names that don't say they're spring water, they're actually just the bottled water that they use at the plants.
And New York City has one of the best water systems, the best water.
Yeah,
I don't know about the best, but
that
it's
was my impression too. But maybe the thing is, Jennifer, that maybe that what's happening is that they're not drinking the water from that aquifer. They may be drinking local well water. So it may be that I believe that that aquifer is reserved strictly for New York City. Rich says, I was just about to post that about NYPD upstate. That is awesome, Rich. Of course you know that. I had no idea. Rich is gonna, by the way, Rich is gonna be my guest next week. So definitely tune in for him.
So he's the one that you weren't sure whether I was or he was going
Yes, okay. Yeah, because he's
Rich.
He's out of state. He's in horses and bourbon country.
Okay, so anything I say, if it's no good, it's your fault because you weren't here instead.
Right. So you guys did a switcheroo. So there's some sort of karmic wheel in motion here. All right, so cool. You kind of threw me a little. So okay, I have a pure geeky one, but I need to. This is definitely relevant for the people who are computer geeks. X Windows, which is the typical graphical user interface framework that's used inside of Linux and the other Unixes, is being dropped in Budgie 11. It's been announced, and yeah, so apparently GTK is also possibly talking about dropping it. If you don't know, GTK is the premier windowing system on Linux. In fact, I'm staring at it right now. It's the thing that makes all these windows look the way they look. And in case you're like, who uses Linux on the desktop? Well, you would have been right a few years ago, but actually, they just did a story last week. It's just hit 3% for the first time ever. So, considering the penetration of computers is basically 100% on Earth right now, that's a lot of Linux computers. So, this is kind of a big deal. I just wanted to include it, so if you're a geek, so you know, X Windows untimely death has been predicted before. So I'm not going to believe it till I see it, but it is clunky, and it is from the 70s, that protocol. So
hey, that goes back to my days.
so like
actually, I go back before that. But
well,
yeah.
Unix is a 70s technology, and Linux is really Unix. So really, this is all we're all just using the stuff that they figured out. You know, Palo Alto Resource Center, the Xerox.
Yeah.
They're the ones who invented the mouse and the printer and the and the GUI and all that. So it's literally that era. That's where this goal goes back to.
Started the whole thing.
Yeah. That's why New York City has the best pizza and bagels. The water. Yes, I've had this debate before. I agree. And there is some pretty bad bagels and pizza elsewhere in the country. So even in other even in nearby states with the same people.
Oh yeah, but
right?
it's in the same process.
The same process.
But it's different water. Absolutely.
It comes out differently. So
there's no question about that. Yeah. My wife comes from Wichita, Kansas, and I like Kansas, by the way. I got to say that in case she's listening, especially. No,
we're not in Kansas anymore.
When I first went and visited her house, they were doing well water. Now, once you've had that, you've got to say New York City water is absolutely the best stuff in the world. Then they went to a city water system where they purified it and everything else. So it's drinkable. Right. But where was I going with that?
Yeah, well, no. I mean, that's because of the pizza and the bagels.
Oh, and but I mean, still, it's not the same water. And when they make the pizza and the bagels out there, what can they do? They just can't do it.
Yeah. So, the funny thing is, we know how to purify water anywhere now. Now that, like, in the past 20, 30 years. But as you said before,
it's the trace elements and things like that stay in there that make the difference.
Right.
It was the elements that made the difference in the first place.
Right.
That made it taste so awful.
Well. That's what it was. That's why I mentioned ancient Rome before. In case you didn't know. Hey, Ariella, thanks for tuning in. In Rome, of course, the pipes were all lead. So the question is, why weren't Romans mad? I mean, they were a little mad, but why weren't they completely out of their minds? And the answer, of course, was that in the aqueducts, the water that they were drawing from was very heavy in lime, and so all the pipes became coated with limestone, and then they stopped leaching lead. And that's why they weren't, So those minerals have more effect than maybe even the people who were drinking at the time realized.
By the way, you also mentioned the difference between New York City water and many other places is because New York City water doesn't come from limestone.
Right. Oh, okay. Interesting.
Okay, it comes from basically a granite kind of base, a volcanic base rock, which does not leak into the water.
But did you know that they're still working on that project, the New York City water? There's actually an unopened tunnel they're still building.
Oh, it's never ending. I mean, it's really
no, like one of the main thorough.
Sure.
They don't have it. The idea was to have a failover,
well,
so they have a second.
They're replacing one of the ones that is going to fail.
Yeah.
And that's basic. But again, they're doing it before it failed. I mean, this is amazing. I mean, this is a city government not supposed to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, it ain't cheap.
Because the water. Well, part of it is the water authority is almost independent. It can do what it wants.
Yeah.
And it is run pretty much by
I just had a water
by technocrats, people who are.
Yeah.
They're scientists basically more than they are politicians, so they can do this.
Right. So and that's an interesting. So okay, that brings up an interesting point. So sometimes people accuse bureaucrats of being technocrats and technocrats of being bureaucrats. but you know, bureaucrats, of course, being the oh well, only we know how the paperwork work version of technocrats, and technocrats being the only we know how the technicals of this work, and so we should make the decisions. But maybe that's one of the keys to kind of breaking out of the technocracy is, you know, recognizing the difference between the two. When is it just paperwork, and when is there a legitimate technical reason why something is the way it is, even if it's not good enough. You know, at least recognizing that, okay, this is a technical reason or this is a paperwork reason, you know, and if it's a paperwork reason, maybe we need a revamp, you know, maybe give it a quick, you know, it's also tough to know when there's a ton of decisions that go into something, you have to be able to tease them out. It worries me about our ability to govern. That's kind of one of the places that I
just to follow up on that technocrat bureaucrat. Remember, a bureaucrat is concerned about their position, and they like to have as much authority as they can and don't like to lose it. So a technocrat comes along and says, well, we can do this and it'll work wonderful, but if it loses authority from that bureaucrat, or power, you could say literally, it doesn't really go too far, and that's where I guess we have to
right. So it has to actually be a practical, functional solution.
Bureaucrats, politicians, generals, principals of schools, okay, you've got to be concerned about all the people involved, not just yourself.
Right. Well, so empathy is definitely the thing that makes civilization possible. You know, without empathy, we don't. I mean, we trust each other to an irrational level.
I was going to say, there's a certain amount of rationalness that can get in there too. Well, I won't do this. You know, I won't do this because it'll blow up the world, and including me. So therefore, I won't do that. There's a rational part. Empathy is it could hurt people, and I don't want to hurt people.
So I'm going to put my glasses on. I've had a request to turn the volume up. Apparently, we're a little bit on the quiet side.
Well, that's the first time anybody ever said that about me.
I know, right? Me either. I think we may have broken reality. I'm going to give us just a gain boost each, and let us know if that is too loud. I don't want to move the mics too close because we can. We're both boomy people, and we can blast pretty loud when we get excited. So, and of course, this is
yes.
This is very exciting. Ariel says in Kentucky we have lots of limestone and good water too, and you have lots of caves. It's all caves there. And
limestone and caves go together.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, because of course the water is able to carve the limestone out relatively quickly.
Limestone
on a geological scale.
And also that water is very limey.
Yeah.
Which helps the lead pipes in Rome.
Yeah, that's right.
I just thought we'd go back.
Does
to
Kentucky have lead pipes? Let us know. I hope not, but you know. No, I don't think so. I think Kentucky's probably. I was pleasantly surprised. It's funny because Kentucky's very. It feels very southern, even though it's kind of on the border. But it feels like you're in the deep south when you're there and you're talking to people. But like, I never felt like out of place. Like I didn't feel uncomfortable. Like I didn't belong there, even though I'm a Yankee. It didn't feel like I was unhappy to be there.
I really have never spent much time in Kentucky, just driven through, but one time we went across the Appalachians into a small community in Kentucky, but there was a good old Kentucky Fried there, and it was a Kentucky Fried where you sat down and a waitress came to you, which was the first time I'd ever seen that. Maybe it's the only place like that. But it was just so funny because it was my first time.
Wait a minute, where were you?
I know. My first time in Kentucky, and the waitress came over and asked us, I assumed she asked us what we wanted. I couldn't understand a word she said. Southern drawl was so strong, I'm sure it beat anything in Mississippi.
Very strong there.
Oh, it's powerful.
Crazy.
It's powerful.
It's weird because Ohio is like almost New Yorkish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tennessee's like Eastern Seaboard. It's like North Carolina.
Well, that's because
where did that happen in Kentucky?
If New Yorkers don't go to Florida, they go to Tennessee.
It's like its own singular. It's like its own black hole of Southern accent. It's crazy.
Well, anyway, that just struck me and.
No, you're more Midwest.
Joyce and I looked at each other and said, no, she is speaking English. Oh, boy. So then I tried to do a Brooklynese back to her, but that didn't work.
Well, okay. Well, at least you identified that. At least the problem was definitely affirmatively identified at that point.
Yeah, we figured it out.
So another quick tech story. I actually started using. I mentioned a few shows ago that I was. Kind of software that I thought was a really great Web 2.5 software, Beeper. It's an experimental. It's brand new. So you know how you have a bunch of different accounts. You have a Facebook account, and you have your text messages, and you have maybe I don't know if you have Instagram or TikTok or
Right, gotcha.
you know, you have all these different accounts, and you get messages on them. Maybe but someone you know sends you a message, and like you don't see it for 2 weeks because you haven't logged into the thing. Well, the idea behind Beeper, and I'm not advertising for this. Is not an advertisement. I just think it's an interesting thing. The idea behind Beeper is to create a single app to rule them all. Essentially, where you have just one inbox and you can see everything. Well, I got my invitation to start my trial, and I got to say, first of all, it is buggy. So if you are life and death dependent on your communications, don't do it yet. But I would say maybe it's a good time to sign up for the trial because I was pretty impressed. I think it's really going somewhere.
If people can't get off their phones now, isn't that going to make it even worse?
I think it'll make it better because I think one of the reasons that people are on their phones is because it's become roaming the casino looking for the slot machine, right? Because what's happened. So one of the things that the tech companies do on purpose, and this is one of the deeply unethical things that nobody's talking about, is they make their programs as addictive as possible. And
I don't think any other company would ever do anything like that.
Yeah, no, they wouldn't.
That never happened.
Well, unfortunately, there's like it's so one of the problems is that because nobody's talking about it, they're getting away with it more than maybe other people were. Like in the early days of cigarettes, right? Like they were getting away with it because nobody was talking about it yet.
On and on and on and on. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So, because it's like that, when you're bouncing between these different apps, it becomes a race to find out which one-armed bandit is less of a bandit, and by you get out of that mindset, that addictive mindset, when you have everything laid out in front of you, and it says, okay, I have a message here and here, and then you don't have to look at them. Right, you can go and look at them if you want. You're like, oh, hey, what's going on? Let me look.
You
at my
get the whole
newsfeed.
Message?
Yeah, you get the whole message.
Okay, okay, not just kind of a.
So it would be literally like as if you
All right.
opened up your text messages, and every message you got on every platform was in your text messages.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm happy with it. I would say definitely. It's called Beeper, Beeper for old school people. Like the thing with the numbers and you had codes and Beeper. Yeah. So
They still have those things around, don't they? Occasionally.
I don't think so. I haven't seen one in at least 15 years, and I was required to carry them for a few jobs.
Oh, okay.
So I have seen flip phones still. There's still.
Oh, they're now coming out again.
Oh yeah, they're cool again.
Yeah, they're cool again.
Well,
and also, it's
you can't get a virus
simpler.
on it.
Yeah, they're simple. Huh?
You can't get a virus on it because it's not the same software. That's one of the things.
Right, yeah.
They're kind of reacting to the monoculture of everyone's running an Android smartphone, and then something comes out that can attack it and attacks everyone's phone, and then it's like a disaster. So, actually, I'm going to grab myself a coffee, and
you want me to grab it for you, and you can keep talking?
No. I'll be quick.
Then you got to move your desk and everything.
I got wheels.
Oh, sorry about that.
Check that out. Yeah. So I've shown people my setup. I'm going to talk a little louder so they can hear me. I've shown people my setup before. Would you like more coffee?
If you're emptying it out, I'll be glad to finish off what you got. Take yours first. You're the one that first said it.
Okay, all right. So here we go. Pouring coffee music. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, wait. I'm the terrible host. Here we go.
Oh, I'm trying to think of this. It's got to be some old advertisements for coffee pouring.
Yeah, probably.
Can't think of any of them.
All right. So people have seen my setup here before. I am my own engineer. I used to have an engineer on my show before, and I miss Steve dearly. He's like a family member to me, and I miss you, Steve. I'd love to have you back working on the Technocrat Live one day, but I just can't do it right now. But one of the cool things about Steve is, and one of the reasons I was excited about you talking about fact checking, is that's one of the things he would offer to our guests. If you want me to fact check for you guys.
Boom, boom, boom.
Right, and he could do it.
I put my phone.
I kind of put it on the poor audience now,
I put my phone out here in case I had to Google something while we're at it.
Nice.
I can still remember in the classroom one time saying, a kid asked me a question. I said, I don't really know the answer to that. Another kid put his hand up and said, well, why don't you Google it? And I was like the beginning, opening my mind. Oh, I can do that.
Well, a good conversation we had.
That does go back years ago, by the way.
A good conversation we had, I think, was it last show? So last week or the week before, talking about how there used to be people who had nearly photographic memories, and you'd have a person in your life that when you had a trivia, like you didn't even know how to refer to a problem or how things worked or where to start. You'd go to that person. You'd be like, I have a problem, and they'd be like, oh, I know how to solve that. This is this and this is this. Look here. and they're kind of like a human Dewey Decimal System, and they've kind of become devalued a little bit because you could just Google it now, right? You know, and it's kind of sad because like it's so, but then again, have they? Because, you know, having different perspectives and different opinions colors it differently, and you can get sometimes better results than you get with the search engines, because the search engines have their own plan.
Oh, yeah, well, sure. I was just going to say, AI now seems to have its own opinions on a lot of things.
And there is a lot of AI behind the scenes running these things.
I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, even if you call them, I guess, a lower level of AI, but definitely is there. Yeah.
Okay, so Jennifer says medical field still uses pagers.
Thank you. I thought so.
And Rich says,
I didn't want to argue, but you know.
Ariel's father still has one. Yeah, Kentucky has 5 different regions. Oh, interesting.
I was thinking medical, okay, I really was, but then I was trying to think and say, I can't remember a specific example of that recently, so I couldn't argue with you on that, but thank you, I'm glad.
I haven't seen one in years. I guess I should ask the doctors.
Oh, you got to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
No, you shouldn't really. I mean, well,
Yeah.
unless you want to visit somebody.
Oh.
All right, visit somebody, that's all right.
Yeah.
Although you don't want to visit anybody either, because that means they're in the hospital.
Right.
All right, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. I actually didn't know that they still use them, but I don't know if you looked that up or you knew it already, but thank you. All right.
I would agree with that. Now, that's where I've seen them.
Yeah.
I have spent some time in hospital, both visiting and being there. But
Right. So let's get into AI. All right. So this is really interesting. The screen. This is the part. This is the one that could have been in entertainment or in the AI section. The Screen Actors Guild and the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers have been in a big fight, and of course the Screen Actors Guild is striking. And why are they doing that? Well, there's been a lot of speculation as to what the reason was, but currently people, it looks like the real thing is AI. And of course, what's that really about? It's about digital likenesses and who owns it. Does the TV station or the own the property of your face and your voice and your character, or do you own it as the actor? And of course, the answer is they don't want to let the actors own it, because then they can just carry on successful stories and properties forever without paying the actor or paying them a minimal amount of money. And here's the really interesting part. So of course, we have a 4-week spoiler rule on here. We have hit our 4-week spoiler rule on one of my favorite shows, Black Mirror. So have you heard of Black Mirror before? So in case I'll spoil a little bit of Black Mirror for you. This is the Black Mirror. That's that's what this show's named
that makes
after.
sense.
Right? It's a British show. It's there in the 6th season, and they have created
I already like it.
fairly coherent universe of near-term. Not every episode, but most episodes are pretty plausible technology changes and their social effects. So you can guess why I love this so much.
Yeah.
They had the new season came out, and they had an episode in the new season. What was it called again? I forgot the name of it. It was Joan is Awful. That's the name of the episode. The speculation is that Joan is Awful, this show on there, is the reason for the Screen Actors Guild strike.
Okay, now, so what's the name of the show again?
Black Mirror.
Okay, and what is it?
And the episode in question is Joan is Awful. So it's a 1-hour episode.
But what do you find it on?
Oh, it's on Netflix. So, but there may be a BBC source for it too. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's exclusively. It started as BBC for sure. I'm not sure if it's exclusively Netflix now or if it's both. But I think it might be just Netflix, because they did this strange like choose your own adventure movie where you could use your remote and play a movie like a game called Boulder Dash. So that was like another weird thing. It's just the one thing. Everything else is just normal.
Boulder Dash is a game.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
a box game.
Yeah. I think I Boulder Dash or something. They changed the name a little bit. They were supposed to be about a retro '80s game that like you get.
Well, that would have fit. There we go. Right
and
there.
Morphs into reality. It's very strange.
Cool.
But so Joan is Awful is about one of the things that happens in that show, in that 1 hour. It's like Twilight Zone. Each one's kind of like, and
that goes back.
And one of the things that happens in that show is that actors are having their likenesses used in a virtual, completely fabricated show because of some document they signed and didn't even realize they signed it.
Oh.
And I mean, you had to see the actors and going off on their lawyers, like, how did you let me sign this? Like, I don't know. And like basically they got trapped in a EULA, and it, Yeah, it didn't, and apparently real actors and actresses are like, oh my god, this can happen, and struck. So, life, fiction imitating life, imitating fiction, imitating life. I don't know. It's bizarre. It just, the rabbit hole just keeps going. So,
Following up on that, I'm not sure if you caught this, but the Communist Party in China has addressed this and come up with a set of rules regulating AI and personal, what do they call that? Personal creativity rights and things like this. It doesn't cover everything, but it covers a lot of the things that we're throwing around and questioning in the United States. Of course, they can do that there because they decide they're going to do it. They do it.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole different process, which I happen to like, but you know, it's
where,
just it's
where
just,
we yell at each other, and eventually someone gets tired, and the other guy wins.
Yeah. There you go. It's pretty close to that, yeah. But yeah, no, it's interesting that they have caught on to that as being a major problem, and attempted to address it. Started with the addressing of that whole question,
Right.
which we've only begun to battle with and argue about and try to even understand, actually.
Right. Right. So
And your strike is really arguing about things nobody really understands completely what could happen very near future, and
Right.
yet they're trying to
it's already
somehow
happening.
grab a hold of it. You know?
They already cited a couple of shows in the article. I don't think I wrote them down.
I know. I'm just thinking that much more than what's been done so far can be happening.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Way more.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah,
And,
agreed.
How do you limit this stuff? You know. And then comes the next question. I'm going to ask you: does AI finally have the right to have a creative copyright?
So no. All right. So
Why
we're talking.
not?
All right. Hold on a second. Let me answer this question. So,
okay.
Jennifer says, seen it. No from people who work in hospital. Oh, that's a beeper thing. I thought it was you're saying you've seen the Black Mirror. No from people who work in hospital staff don't really use cell phones regularly. There are dead zones and interference with equipment. Oh, I see. They consider the beepers to be safe for RF zones. Okay, got it. That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So as far as AI having rights, there's a few things. Do you want to hear the legal thing, or you want to hear my ethical take on it first? Because there's been some news on the legal
front. Take your pick. I don't know. Go ahead.
So we have. So I believe the Grammys has said that they will accept. There's a lot of AI generated music coming out lately. So they said they'll accept.
Some of which isn't bad.
A lot of it is, which is not bad. So they said they'll accept Grammy candidates for the Grammys if it's a 20% human produced content. So in other words, if you think about a 5-piece band, one of the people has to actually be a person.
And if it's a musical score, 20% of it has to be written.
20, yeah, right. So like theoretically, you could like have like the entire violin section and maybe the maybe the timpanis, as digital, but like you'd need some of the brass to be humans or something like that. So anyway, that's what they said for the Grammys. I have no idea how they're going to quantify that. Good luck. But at least they did something. They didn't just go, we don't know.
They're recognizing the problem.
Yeah, they recognize the problem. That's the first step. So
how do you get a machine up there to accept the award?
Do
you roll in this part of
I guess you just roll
AI?
a box in.
Yeah, something like that.
I just carry a laptop
But
in and put it on
no. I am correct though that
room.
these AI chat box things are actually almost building size computers essentially.
Well, not necessarily. So there's all this. I know all about this. So this is
Good.
good.
Yeah, I'm asking the question. Because
Yeah. So wow, there's a lot to unpack here. So
I don't know if you want to do that. We can skip it if you want, but
no.
It is something I'm curious about.
Well, I end up going over.
I've sort of heard that because you were.
I don't want to dive too hard into it because we end up going over to every show, but I'll try to give the. I've been blasting through it, so my pitch is getting better on it. So
you mean you have a point? Okay.
Yeah, I have a point. Yeah, there is a point. I'm pretty good at getting to the point. So the really fast version is AI is a misnomer. Everyone uses AI. I just use it because that's what everyone knows what we're talking about. But the AI is really machine learning, and what machine learning is it's basically you have a program that writes other programs, and it does it in a Darwinistic way, and it just makes minor changes, and then it runs those second programs against a data set. And I'll give you a quick example of a data set. Identify all the stop signs. That is actually training AI, whether you know it or not. You're actually training probably a self-driving car when you're doing that, right? So data sets that are known to be true, more or less, and so it's running through that, and they're measuring. They have a test suite, which things are facts, and then the algorithm that does the best at discerning the result you want is the algorithm that wins, right? The Darwinistic kind of battle, and then that's the algorithm you use, and then take that and you go back to this algorithm, feed it to here, and then generate a whole new range of randomly kind of generated algorithms and look for the best one.
So you're saying that there's actually not creative thinking.
Not at all.
Without there being a base of information relating to that behind it.
You need the information to train it, yes. So,
and of course, the more information you give, the more it has.
So when they say AI and they show you a huge room full of computers, that is the training process. The actual AI, so what this generates, these algorithms, what they generate, they're actually neural nets. So it's basically a decision tree that each AI is good at different things. So we do not have a generalized AI right now. They're only good at a thing. They're good at driving a car, or they're good at
actually that doesn't
games.
work too well. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, or they're good at speaking, or they're good at generating video, or they're good at generating audio, or something like that. And that's how we're doing it right now, because it's an easier. One of the problems here is it's an easier problem to solve when you're doing the machine learning Darwinistic cycle thing, where you're trying to generate better and better, algorithms, essentially. So there's a whole bunch of problems that comes up with this. One is there's no reversibility. You don't know why the algorithm's doing what it's doing. You just know it works better, but you don't know why it works better. It could be doing something terrible.
And you could find that all of a sudden it flips on you because you didn't understand why it was doing what it was doing.
Right. Well, so so one of the things that is causing people, the thing that's causing people to freak out about AI right now, the self-driving cars has been going on for years, and so that's like, while they're making progress, it's not impressive enough to spook people. The thing that's spooking people is OpenAI, the company OpenAI, and their product ChatGPT. And ChatGPT is really good at linguistic AI. And linguistic AI looks to us, like to humans, as the one that's actually intelligent on its own. But it's not. What it's actually doing is it's guessing the most likely word, one word at a time. And then there's a randomness factorization in there. And because if you don't use randomness, then it feels really robotic.
I love that story of the South American Airlines, somebody suing the South American Airlines in the United States, and the lawyer goes to and he comes back with 3 court cases that shows he can sue the airlines for such and such.
Right.
And then they find out that all 3 cases were completely created by AI.
So whatever chat, the different products, right? Just like
I don't know which one it is. Yeah, right. So
right. You have like different web browsers or different email clients. There's different products, and so there's a lot of weird things going on with this, like with the products right now. And one of the things is, so you have this company, OpenAI, and they had ChatGPT 3, which everyone, like lots of companies that were specializing that needed this to do a thing, were using. ChatGPT 4 is good enough to actually have a conversation with a human and occasionally come up with human-like responses. 4.5 feels a little dangerous. It kind of feels like you're talking to a person. Apparently, what they're saying is 5 is so good they won't even release it. They're saying it is a civic danger to release this thing because it's just going to displace too many jobs too quickly, and there's going to be like kind of an economic apocalypse because all these people, basically everybody whose job it is to just spit out words in order, are going to lose their job. Who knows if that's true? Great advertising, well, but it could be true.
Another example about how these the base computer programming can go awry without knowing it comes exactly to what you're talking about. 4 and 3.5, I think you mentioned. This was in the news today.
Yeah. 4.5 is the biggest public one, the newest public one.
Well, I think the 4.0 there was existed.
Yeah, 4 is like kind of free, so that's why people use 4.
Okay. Well, apparently the question of is a number like 1717, is that a prime number?
Okay.
Okay, and of course, I guess they threw it at 4.0 years ago, or not years ago, but sometime in the past. And 98% of it came back saying it was, and 2% said it wasn't. So there was a little error in there.
Right.
Okay, and now 4.0 is 2% correct and 98% wrong.
Right.
And
then
so 3.5 reversed the other way. It didn't know way back when it started, and now it's 87% correct.
So here's the interesting thing: so again, it's a linguistic AI. It's not a math AI.
Right.
It's not necessarily good at math.
Obviously.
Right. Obviously, right. And this is its weakness. It's not a generalized intelligence. It's not a neural net that can be applied to whatever is thrown its way.
No,
it only
but
works on this
there
one
is
thing.
mathematical thinking in almost everything we do to some degree.
Agreed.
So therefore, it does make a question of just how
and it's
accurate
being
is it
trained
across
on
the-
human interactions, and those human interactions do have mathematical concepts embedded in them. So you think it would pick them up? in the
Probably
neural
also
net.
mathematical inaccuracies too.
So
but
it's probably just scoring badly. When they're scoring the results and comparing the algorithms, if the scoring mechanism is broken, the algorithm that is selected is going to be broken because it's not going to be, it's only, garbage in, garbage out. You're only as good as your bad data, which is true with science and scientific testing and experimentation as much as it is, and it is computer science. So, yeah.
Oh, come on, you can get
Bad computer
really
science.
good results from bad data.
Yeah.
The good results being defined as what you want to see.
Convenient, yeah.
Yeah.
Cherry picking, anyone? But yeah, so.
By the way, is this the record for how long it's taking you to get through the news?
No, I've never left the news. Yeah, that happens occasionally.
Oh, okay, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. It's almost like turning into a news show. But I have a whole interview. I could just stop, but I don't want to. This is really good stuff.
Well, go ahead, keep going.
I think this is interesting.
You want me to
right?
shut up for a while? I'll shut up. That's all right.
No, it's okay. Anyway, so there's 160,000 people in the Screen Actors Guild. Anyway, so check out Joan is Awful if you want to see what they're all up in arms about. It's really amazing that one show can have that kind of effect, though, at this point. And I'm not surprised. TheVerge.com is where I picked that up.
By the way, you can see why the Writers Guild hit that first.
Yeah.
Because obviously they could easily be wiped out. And so then the screen actors realize that they can be duplicated too.
Right.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool, but slowly they catch on. Oh, by the way, do you know that the Screen Actors Guild is run by a good Flushingite, Fran Drescher?
I did not know that.
Oh yeah, she's in charge of it. I just love that because when she was on The Nanny, her Flushingite voice just came through so strong.
Yeah.
And I love that. I heard her the first time. I said, she's from Flushing, and sure enough, she was. I mean, it's just crazy.
That is crazy.
There is a Flushingite kind of sound.
I didn't know she ran the Screen Actors Guild.
Now she's president. Yeah.
Wow! Holy cow! That's amazing.
And nobody thought she had a brain in her head. Ha!
Yeah. Well, that's the gig, right? You know.
Sure. All right. There you go.
Yeah. Wow. You really wrinkling my brain today. I'm impressed. Of course, you're a team. This is why I had you on. I knew you would do that.
Well, actually, I'm also a news geek. Okay, I just love eating up and learning things. I have a tremendous number of books. My object would be to learn what's in each one of them.
Right.
And of course, we don't really get too far on that, but
Right.
Yeah, that's what I like doing. It's called what do you call it? Lifelong learning.
You're training your neural net.
I'm just scared of what happens when I stop learning, or what happens when I finish learning. What good did all that learning do?
Well, you know what happens?
I don't know.
When you stop
See,
learning.
This is great because we have a chance to talk about some of these things I
possible
put
is if
in
you
here.
know it all. Just anyone who stopped learning, they'll tell you they know it all. Yeah. So the AI, apparently AI, some companies have been training AI. Speaking of data, I really segued right into this. Being trained with artificial data on purpose. So, and the companies that are doing this include OpenAI, Microsoft, and Cohere. So these are major companies. OpenAI is the big one that everyone's talking about right now. And yeah, they say they're all kind of creating these artificial data sets because one of the things that's happening, so to train their AIs to get better results, they were training them on bigger and bigger data sets, which means more and more of the internet, which means more and more garbage in, because some of the conversations are just nonsensical or crazy or not well organized, or so they've actually started restricting down and getting tighter, more specific data sets and answers. maybe better curated. And it's kind of interesting. This is from Reuters.com if you want to check it out. No, is that right? No. Yeah, this is from Financial Times. But the thing that's they're doing this is to react to feedback loops, and so like where it just gets into it assumes something's true because it's getting predictable feedback. So, that must be true because these people are talking about it that way, or hallucinations, which may be one of the things that may cause hallucinations is feedback loops. So I don't think that's the only one. Hallucinations is the name of made up facts, which AI is terrible with. It tends to make up a lot. It's very interesting to think about intelligence wants to lie. What? Well, why don't we lie so much?
Well,
Maybe
it
because
doesn't. Lying is, I guess you could say, a morality kind of question, something beyond it.
Right, exactly. So this is one of the things that I think that they're missing in AI, that they don't have they don't have a conscience. You know?
Of course not. AI doesn't have a conscience.
Right, and that conscience is actually one of the things that's making humanity the most valuable.
No,
as valuable as it is right now.
The question is, can you build one in?
Right. Well, this is what they're trying to answer by curating the data sets, and it reminds me very much of what a parent does. You know, a parent will present artificial scenarios where, you know, or eventually a teacher will create broader and broader artificial scenarios that are a little safe, but pretty much emulate the real world to try to train children to survive. You know, to understand a problem that maybe if you looked at the whole thing at once, you'd choke because you just can't digest it all. So very interesting. Check that out. I think it's. I think we're going to see more of this. I think we're going to see more of how humans and how animals train themselves. You know, maybe we're going to see AIs. The next thing we're going to hear about is AIs playing. You know, like finding ways to play with other AIs. And, you know, of course, sandbox, right? We don't want to let them out of sandbox. There's crazy stuff will happen.
We certainly will expect that AI could duplicate what any animal, as we know it right now, can do.
Right.
We're not really sure what the extent of a porpoise's intelligence is, nor the of an octopus, okay?
Right.
Where they fit into the whole thing. But certainly they should be able to duplicate a dog.
Right.
Or a cat, or an eagle, or something like that.
Well, you'd think that, but it's actually interesting because when you get into like the higher intelligence animals, like maybe dogs or a dolphin or a primate, we start getting into this strange space where they're better at some things than we are. Like primates actually have better short-term memories than we do, like way better. Like we remember a phone number, 7 digits, right?
But there's reasons for that. Like they don't have to remember as much as we do.
Well, that's true. But the thing is, they have an excellent if you present them, and you can present, they'll design a game that both the primate and a human can play, and they'll usually use a human child because it's more fair, right? It's not memory. You haven't memorized something. You're just playing a game, and like a series of numbers. And I mean, a human can typically do about 7, a phone number. That's about what we've got. Maybe there's one that can do 9 or 10, but that's it. Primates are 20. The chimps are 20. They go, because they're going to get a treat at the end, so they learn to react to the number sequence really fast. And so, of course, what does that tell us? It tells us that our intelligence isn't memory based. And I think that's actually subtle, but it's really important. So, I mean,
it's extremely important.
I mean, eagles have better vision than us, right?
Obviously.
When you get into like there's specialized behaviors. The theory is with the chimps is the reason why is because the visual complexity of the environment that they're literally swinging through trees is so fast, it's changing so quickly. They need to be able to identify threats like this.
Would make sense.
Like where we don't necessarily have to do that. We're on a slower time clock than they are. It would be wasted glucose on our brains. We don't need it. So we didn't specialize for it. But yeah, I mean, there's. I would even go so far to say is like I've long had the idea that what some people will call mental disorders are really just out of context advantages, right? If you're in a situation where you need to be reacting to general changes in your environment, something like ADD or ADHD might be an advantage, right? You don't get hyper focused on one thing,
you keep perspective on everything going around you, and that's an advantage in that
Sure,
situation. They tend to be bosses a lot.
Sure, when you're talking about dyslexia, that was very clear that until everybody was supposed to read, it was no problem for anybody. In fact, may have even had advantages. But
Right.
once everybody had to read, then it became a problem.
Right, because you're expected to read in a certain order, and
So your culture,
excellent.
Your culture changes those things. I think
and some other cultures read backwards. They read, I think the Cyrillic languages, they read instead of reading left to right, they read right to left. So maybe they're normal, right?
Well, I know Hebrew does, and actually Chinese has done that and this kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay, yeah.
out of context advantage. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, so I just, it's going to be really interesting to see what AI will do and how it will, what they'll try to make AI more accurate. But the interesting thing is, if ChatGPT 5 is already like working and so amazing they can't release it in private, and they're still trying to improve it from there, but we can't even see it because it's too dangerous for us. Who is seeing it? So, I mean, I don't want to like get too conspiratorial, but
oh well,
if this is such a huge advantage, who is looking at this stuff and who's using it? Because
well,
somebody is. They have to know it's that good, so someone has access to it. For sure, the geeks in that company.
When you're talking about the potential here of disaster, I'll call it disaster for human beings.
Yeah,
it just goes on. I always like to say your biggest problem is when a computer is not able to be turned off, because it has controlled all of its energy source and is able to protect its environment and everything. And then what happens?
Right.
Now, I'm not sure that's all that far away. It sounds a little extreme, but
right.
If it can control all that stuff, it can control all of the electronic and Wi-Fi and every kind of signaling that goes on. So therefore, your military would be lost. No way to communicate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, yeah, AI has got the potential to destroy the human race without any question.
Did you hear about the one with the drone and the drone operator? So this was a story that came out of the Air Force, and then they retracted it. But it stood for a week, and people were really talking about it. So apparently they ran a simulation. It wasn't physical, right? Nobody got hurt or anything. They ran a simulation where they basically gave a drone with running AI autonomy and said, achieve your objective. And the drone figured out the quickest way to achieve its objective was to kill its operator.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, and then they said, well, and then actually they talked about it at length in the press, and they were actually like, this is disturbing at a next level because we can say you can't kill the operator, but it'll just go to the next step. Like if it followed that logic, then the next step it's going to follow is I can just blow up a control tower.
Or blow up the dam so that everybody gets flooded out.
Right, or just shut down this piece of the power grid or something like that.
Absolutely, sure.
Right, and so and of course then the Air Force came out like a week and a half later and said, nope, that didn't happen. We made it all up. I don't think they did. I think it's true, and they got so much political pressure. They're like, oh my God, what are you doing?
Absolutely, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Joshua from War Games, yeah, absolutely. Anyway, so let me get on to tech government. Why? Why the hell do bank transfers take 3 days? Well, apparently somebody in the Fed noticed, and they now have a new service called FedNow, which is 24/7 instant transfers between banks. You don't have to wait 3 days for a bank transfer to clear anymore. Hooray! Welcome to the future. A lot of countries have this. And it's kind of ridiculous.
My question kind of is, why did they have that in the first place? Why was that delay?
Honestly, I've heard so many conspiracy theories about it. I don't even want to speculate. If somebody knows why the delay was in place before, I think maybe there was an administrative part to it. It might have just been bureaucracy. So this is one of those interesting, like, bureaucracy versus technocracy. At some point,
or it could be
the cryptocurrencies just embarrassed the banks into saying, "Oh my God, we're not doing our job."
I guess then I also think, could there be a safety factor involved in that somewhere?
Well,
with that delay, there is a chance that it could be stopped if it was, criminal.
Right. So if somebody were theoretically to break into a server where they had the private keys for some sort of transaction. They could do a whole bunch of bank transfers really fast. 3 seconds later, all the money's gone.
Correct.
You know, and like, hey, where'd the money go? And it's already moved away. So
Which gets very difficult to get it back.
right. So you know, yeah.
So it could be a safety
breaking.
factor where.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure why you can't check that immediately. I mean, but what about just one transfer?
Right.
One transfer isn't going to raise anybody's red flags,
Right.
nor any AI's red flags.
Right.
But it could be illegal. But somebody could catch it in the meantime and get back to the bank and say, hey, I didn't authorize that.
So this might be a question of monitoring and seeing how closely we can monitor them, and if we
Well,
can keep the monitoring. and
you're
keep
just
up
saying,
with,
why was it? Now, I never thought about why was it. I just found it annoying myself.
Yeah, of course, everyone did.
So what I did is I nicely just wrote out a check to myself, went down to the bank, took money out of an account that I had there, and put the check in. So, you know,
Right,
I
right.
said, I'm doing this the old-fashioned way, the way I remember from years and years ago. And I pretended I was a real old man, you know.
Right, yeah.
I'm
sorry, what?
The teller
Yeah.
got a kick out of that. you know.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I've done that too, where you just like, okay, I know this money's segregated for this. I mean, because if it's something where you're controlling, you know, it's not illegal. I'm not talking about doing something illegal, a legal segregation of money. But like, you know, you just have, oh, this is my savings account, this is my checking account. I'll just take the money. I can't get the money out of the savings account quick enough. I'll just take it out of the
I
checking
got
account.
money in different banks. Not that I have a lot in any of the banks, but
Yeah.
because the paperwork of trying to keep an account, one fund that has different monies going to different places.
Right.
I did that. I tried that, and I got it so screwed up. I said, "Nah, I'm just going to put money for this in this account, money for that in that account, and I can transfer it when I need to for
Right.
an emergency. But other than that, it keeps some control."
Yeah, no, I completely understand what you're saying.
So
yeah.
you know. Anyway. There you go.
Yeah. So anyway, so
I had that three. I was really annoyed by that. You brought it up, and I said, yeah.
yeah. So
But
Roy,
I didn't think about why. Why did they do it?
I guess it's an anti-fraud fraud measure. You know, it's a fire break of sorts. You know,
It could be. I'm just saying.
There's
it could
lots
be.
of different names for lots of different kinds of. So a lot of computer security, which would be computer security at this point, is an arms race. So and a lot of the computer security constructs out there are really just fire breaks. You know how just cut down some trees in the middle and basically not give it a. You air gap things.
Which sometimes tells you that the old-fashioned way of doing things are safer now than the new ways.
Well, I'll tell you, when I had a substantial amount of cryptocurrency, I air gapped it because I'm like, I understand computer security, but I'm like, I don't have to babysit this thing 24/7. There's no reason to leave it online. I'm just gonna air gap it. Just put it on a drive and shut it off, and then nobody can get it because you can't get to it. So I get that whole delay and its utility. I just
I don't know if that's a reason or not, but anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of interesting.
Giving the banks the benefit of the doubt.
Right. NYPD, check this out, is going to test, their excuse for this at least anyway, is they're going to test, actually they have been testing announcement drones. So we're talking about, yes, airborne drones. A lot of people are herald drones, so to speak. A lot of people are arguing this is an end run against surveillance tech rules for New York City. On 7/16, they actually conducted a test with it. They had drones in the air saying things to people. I don't know if they actually said things to people. Maybe they just did noises so they could verify they worked. But that's supposedly their end goal on the Brookville Boulevard between 149th Avenue and Rockaway Turnpike in Queens. So imagine you're there and you're just walking through the intersection and there's just drones hovering there telling you things.
I'm not sure of this, but I thought the mayor alluded to this when he was being criticized for not responding to proper announcements for bad air quality, and I think he alluded to the possibility of drones giving out those messages to people.
Right.
Because when you said this, that rang a little bell. Well, I may be wrong on that one.
This brings up a couple of questions. One of them is, okay, first of all, why is this necessary? Because everyone's already got a cell phone in their pocket. You have an emergency alert system. Just send them an emergency alert. You can do it by physical proximity. Like, okay, everyone in this region here gets this alert. Why are you doing this with drones?
There is a percentage of people, like the homeless, for instance, who don't have cell phones that will be getting it. And
Right,
that,
right.
I think, is where the criticism comes in.
Right.
Most
So-
people with cell phones get that information. You know,
Right.
they're tuned in enough. But there is those who don't.
Well, here's the possible downside and the trickery. So the possibility is that this is the New York City's the accusation against New York City is that this is their end run around the Post Act, which is the public oversight of surveillance technology. So of course the thing is, if you have drones and they're hovering in the air and they're saying things to people, you need to operate those drones. You need to keep an eye on. You make sure they don't fall on someone's head, pull their hair. You know, cause a car to crash. You gotta keep an eye. You have to have a two-way connection with them. Well, you can use that two-way connection to spy on people now. So is that what they're really up to? You know, I don't know, but there's a lot of back and forth on this. Vice.com if you want.
You're touching on one of the things I've been doing a lot of driving, both within Flushing and going out on the island once or twice a week out onto the island. And one of the things, now a little illusion is when I was a teacher, I always had this little saying for myself, don't make a rule you can't enforce.
Okay.
And so therefore, as I'm driving out on the island and it has these signs, do not cross the barrier where the double lines are to go into the HOV line. And it's just becoming common now for people to just cross whenever they feel like it, which makes common sense, but it's against the law.
Right.
So which means, what's the sense of making that as a rule?
Right.
Also, how many people pass me by with only one person in the car then there's a cop car one place in Nassau County, but I've been driving all the way from middle of Suffolk, and I've seen how many cars, because I'm in the left lane of the proper lanes during the time, and you know, so
Kind of
one
thinking
guy
like a
gets
lawyer
caught.
a little bit here.
Okay, you know, so you're talking about drones, and of course the answer to a lot of that is, yeah, drones should patrol, because they can be up there and hover and be able to, you know, finger a car, and then the cops can pull the car over, and they've got proof, pictures, the whole works.
So okay, here's a good counterpoint. Excellent point, and I got a good counterpoint for you. So, what you're describing when people are just, you know, just ignoring the double white lines on the HOV lane and just, you know, entering and exiting whenever they feel like it, is natural law. So you have, you know, it's instead of having a de facto law where like, okay, we have decreed this is the law and you will follow our fiat, and then you have a kind of a de jure law, which is just, you know, everyone thinks it's normal to cross the barrier in the HOV. And now, not everyone thinks that. Most people don't think that. Most people still follow it, but you do get people.
The majority,
it's
but
happening
the
more
percentage,
now.
yes.
It's happening more now. It's increasing, right? The natural law is kind of taking over there. So an example of a natural law that almost everybody agrees on, at least a majority of the motorists, is breaking the speed limit, specifically on, like, say, the LIE, which was designed to go way faster than the speed limit is on the LIE. It's a 55-mile-an-hour expressway.
Oh, is there a speed limit there?
Yeah, exactly. It was a 55-mile-an-hour expressway.
Once again, when was the last time you saw somebody pulled over for speeding?
Well, when was the last time you saw somebody pulled over for driving 56 miles an hour? Never. Ever. But they're technically breaking the law.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've been told by two policemen, one who was a parent of a student in a school,
Yeah.
and one who pulled me over, who said simply, well, you know, we always give you 10 miles an hour. Almost every place in the United States gives
Right.
you 10 miles an hour over the speed limit.
Right, because
Which
that's the difference
goes to
between
say
de facto
that
and de jure, or
speed
natural
limit
law.
is a purely political thing, not a scientific thing. It wouldn't fit the technocrats, because the road was designed for God knows how fast.
Yeah. I mean, they were like, originally the pitch for the LIE. Now, stop me if I'm wrong, because this was before my time, but I've read and heard that the pitch for the LIE was kind of an autobahn. You know, just like it's like a super high speed roadway that you could just go as fast as your vehicle would let you.
I love.
You know?
Have you ever driven on an autobahn?
I have not, no.
It's really cool, because each time you get to an intersection, after the entrance from the intersection, they have above the 3 lanes.
Mm-hmm.
Each lane has a speed limit.
Mm-hmm.
One of which might be blank. In other words, that's the one that you can go any speed you want to on.
Right.
Which I did.
Nice.
Oh, don't tell my wife. Oh, don't tell her.
Well, now you're gonna know if she was watching or not.
Yeah.
You have a good
No,
test.
Actually, she did. I told her afterwards. Well, afterwards.
I saw somebody with a plaid mode Tesla, like the top end Tesla Model S, and they recorded themselves. You know, obviously they weren't holding it; they mounted it, but they're recording themselves on the autobahn, which is totally legal in Germany.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they were going 260 kilometers an hour, so is that 200 miles per hour?
Well, I did notice the same thing in France. Only in France
It
they
looked
don't.
bonkers.
In France, there's no law that allows that.
Yeah.
I was driving from Paris south, and I noticed that the only cars that were going well over the speed limit were the ritzy cars.
Yeah, yeah.
And the rest of us kind of followed the speed limit. I had a rental, you know, and so I finally found out, how do you, you know, why is that? Well, apparently it's because you do get tickets because they've got cameras all the way along or in the various places along there. And either the people with the expensive cars know where the cameras are, or they don't care if they get it, because again, it doesn't go against them personally, just against the car, so they pay the bill, no big deal.
I've actually seen this in Northern Boulevard. It's interesting. So there's sometimes you'll get a person, you know, Northern Boulevard's covered with school cameras, even though, you know, like, all right, yes, I understand that
in Queens
they're within a few blocks of a school, but like they just installed one on the service road for the LIE. So I'm on the service road at 3 in the morning. I'm 11 over. You know, it's,
oh yeah, 36. I have gotten a bunch on 36 miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, it drives me crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm 11, and I just didn't even realize, like, my foot slipped. You know, just.
But you know what?
I just come off the parkway, so you have that kind of parkway head where you're traveling with the speed of the parkway.
No excuses.
Well, granted, I'm paying it.
On the other hand,
I
got to say, on Union Turnpike, Francis Lewis out to where Union Turnpike ends, I wind up taking that quite a bit, and it used to be a raceway. I mean, you know, you could go long distances, fairly long distances on it, and hitting the pedal. Mm-hmm. And I did. All of a sudden, they put in some speed cameras. Do you know it's the smoothest thing going 25, 30 miles an hour now?
Yeah.
Everybody, it works.
Well, hold on. So this is I'm actually gonna counter this. So it doesn't always work, in the sense that one of the things I've noticed on Northern Boulevard in my neighborhood, you know, there's some wealthy neighborhoods around there. I'd say every other time I drive on it, you'll get one guy in the left lane. He's just blasting through those speed cameras. He don't care.
Right, because it's a $50 ticket, and who cares about $50?
They do have a 50.
Or they've got a lawyer that knows how to get them out of it.
They do have a 15 ticket limit where they make you take a course, but like, you know, if you're in a hurry and you got money and there's only 3 cameras, you're like, I don't care.
Yeah.
You just blast through them. You know, so there's the 2 lanes of 25 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, and there's 1 lane of 40.
Or 50. Yeah.
Yeah, or 50. Yeah, because they're like, what are you gonna do? Well, also, yeah, that's another thing too, right? So now there's no. They rearrange the cop schedules around the roads that don't have the cameras, because most people behave on those roads. So, and then, the traffic behavior changes. So now you've got a bigger differential between the cars on this road where there's no cops to see it, right? So, you know, that's an unintended consequence of using the technology.
Except that really there's not that many who are willing
No.
So far, so good.
Well, this is a new thing.
And by the way, did you know that was New York State that allowed New York City to put those cameras in?
Yeah, I did.
City cannot do it by itself.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Well, they had to lower the speed. They had to allow them to lower the speed limit. That was part of it.
Yes, that's all part of it again.
Yeah.
The state did this years ago. Again, when Tammany was in charge and the state was mostly Republican.
Yeah.
That was how they controlled New York City, by simply saying, they make a rule saying any city over 1 million can't do this. Any city under 1 million can. And that was the law. Now, I'm not sure how much of that follows through at this point, but there's that thinking that they're in control of New York City, not New York City in control of them.
Right.
And on the other hand, it's just unfair in New York City that, you know.
Well, I mean, it very much is. I agree with that. Yeah.
Oh, but that's politics, isn't it? I'm sorry. It'll get into that.
No. This is fine. Actually, this is, you know, Washington D.C., New York City, Albany. You know, this is like Albany's the capital of New York.
It's generic. It's not specific, and we didn't mention anything about.
Right.
I said Tammany, but you did before too.
I did too. I think Tammany.
But that is not a party. That's not a party.
Generally speaking, I have like a 100-year rule. Like, if you wanted to, like, you know, say something about Abraham Lincoln, I'd let it go because it's like so freaking long ago. You know, but I still try to avoid it, right? You know, like if it's possible, just because it can muddy the waters.
Oh no,
right?
no, I understand fully. I didn't think I was really breaking that.
No, you didn't.
No, well, the point wasn't that anyway. Yeah.
You're actually talking about politics and following the rule more intelligently than some of my other guests. Like, you're really nailing it. So,
I'm sorry about that.
well done.
To the other guests.
Well done.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. All right, so let's get on to science. Science. So the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Now this is going to be a controversial one with somebody, I'm sure. I'm just going to read it. And the White House have cut off the funding to the Wuhan Virology Lab. So that's the lab that was at the center, the geographic center of the COVID outbreak, the COVID-19 outbreak at the beginning, due to failures in safety protocols, and also for allowing gain of function research. And of course, there's a lot to this. If you made accusations that that virus came from that lab, or if you said that that lab was doing gain of function research, you were kicked off of social media. You were booted, and this is like, I can't think of much better evidence of a technocracy, because they were just wrong. I mean, we've got multiple government agencies, the FBI and the DOD have basically come out and said, yeah, we think it was lab built and it escaped, or they haven't said so much as I think one of them actually said it was an attack. They think it might have been an attack, but maybe not necessarily China. It might have been, but like they didn't say it was an attack. They said it was possible, but that this was some kind of warfare.
In other words, it was let loose on purpose.
It was yeah, that maybe it wasn't Chinese government that let it loose on purpose, but somebody did, and I mean, this is crazy. I mean, it's just crazy on so many levels. First of all, because I mean, this is pretty much like a global war footing, but also I'll tell you one thing. There was plenty of documentation out there, and I worked in genetics labs, that gain of function research is a thing. In fact, this is one of the reasons you have level 5 research labs, and you kind of need to do. I don't want to see necessarily gain of function be attacked as being always banned, because you have this is complicated.
When you say DNA, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, DNA. You're saying it so fast, I wasn't sure that's.
Well, gain of function.
Oh, gain.
Gain of function. So gain of function research is something very specific. So it refers to doing genetic modification on a disease,
which is DNA. Okay, I find.
Yeah. So you're basically changing the attributes of a disease, which is already, that affects humans. And I mean, I think that's specifically what it refers to. I don't think it necessarily refers to, if something's thought to only be effective to animals, it isn't necessarily gain of function research. But if it's human, if it's a bacteria or a virus that can affect humans, and you change its genetic makeup.
That kind of research is going on all over the place.
Oh yeah.
The only question is,
the crazy thing is that people in the press were denying it. I'm like, I worked at these places; they're doing this for sure. I mean, maybe not necessarily at my particular institution, but it was discussed and it was understood. You have to have really high safety protocols, because obviously, if a person gets affected, it can take over the whole world. It could turn into a pandemic. But
I think the problem there was, even though it was always a major probability, it hadn't been proven in any way for a long time.
Right.
And therefore, I think that the media was clamping down on those who said, this is what happened.
Right.
Because it didn't necessarily. And the
Agreed.
other implication it was also part of that whole conspiracy thing of it having been done on purpose to affect us, etc.
Right.
And basically, the long and short of it doesn't come out to be that. Yes, it probably came from the lab, but if it was done on purpose, it wasn't necessarily an international thing. It could have been right within.
Right. It could have been a political faction. It could have been
the other problem, of course,
fighting
is
inside of
China hiding everything.
Right.
That is always what's annoying, is they don't open up anything to a mutual investigation.
Mm-hmm.
And so but I got a real question with your news article here.
Yeah. So let me just say this.
Wait. How on earth are we funding the Wuhan lab?
So one of the things that happens, so I can tell you this from personal experience, but it's also well documented out there. Generally speaking, most scientists, not all, And this is one of the things. This is one of the places where our military kind of gets involved sometimes and says, "Hey, maybe you need to change this."
Yeah.
But and any country's military would say, "Hey, maybe you need to change this."
Yeah.
But generally speaking, most scientists operate as if it is a global initiative and we're all just one big happy family.
Oh,
You
yeah,
know?
scientists like working on that basis.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean I don't blame them because
But that doesn't still say funding goes there.
Yeah, well, no, but for sure we are funding research at the Wuhan lab, and quite a bit actually. So, and one of the things that happened
So
is
does China fund some of our labs?
Yeah,
Oh,
and
okay.
actually, and this is kind of an interesting perspective. This is something that comes up very subtly, and I'm not going to say which lab now because now we're starting to get into me screwing with my old jobs.
Don't.
But I'm in a lucky position because I've had multiple lab jobs, so I can just say labs, and you don't know which one, right? So in general, yeah, I mean, there's some concern about espionage and international espionage, and people who are, everybody's got different loyalties. Some people, a lot of scientists, bless their hearts, are loyal to science. They just want the truth out there. But not everybody. Some people are loyal to their current country. Some people are loyal to a previous country if they're immigrants. And there's a ton of immigrants in the sciences.
A particular country can put pressure on you to make you do things that
Right.
you might not automatically do otherwise.
And this is not necessarily an attack against any particular country. I mean, I'm sure, like just let's use an example, an American in France, so something random, right? There is an American in France right now, an American scientist in France for sure that is being pressured to reveal something back to the United States government, and is being expected to act like a United States citizen because they still are, and that's so, there's a distinction between a foreign national and a naturalized
We've had
citizen.
some of our close allies complaining to us about that. Yes.
Yeah. So like a scientist, you may be brilliant, and you may be the most important person in your field or one of the most important people in your field, but that doesn't, but you're also a citizen of a country, and it may not be the country you're currently working in. So who's your loyalty to?
My question had to do with funding, though, and I can see you can be working cooperatively with a lab. Harvard's lab could work with Wuhan's lab, and working cooperatively. But how does that funding wind up going there?
Oh, because it doesn't really. I mean, it's the future. It doesn't really matter where you're physically located. It doesn't, yes, there's a physical building, but I mean, yeah, you could be, like, let's say you're an American citizen and you go to a foreign country. There's some reason, there may be restrictions in a particular grant that says you can't get this grant if you're not on American soil, but most of them aren't like that. They just, yeah, sure.
So it's through the grant process, probably. Oh, okay. Now
So
okay.
NIH and NSF are the primary grant sources,
So Wuhan could be working on something with Harvard that we're funding the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean,
and take back Harvard. I mean, that's just
we're just
pulling out a name.
Sorry, Harvard.
Yeah, no,
we're not picking on you.
I know nothing about that at all. Could be totally.
I understand. Sometimes it gets hard when everything's abstract. You got to nail something down.
Yeah, well, I'm a concrete thinker. Some people say between my ears is just concrete.
Nice.
Well, however you want to do it, It's. Well, I ask some of my students. Ask Sebastian.
Yeah. So so I mean, this is a very touchy subject, and I've been I'm pretty good at kind of walking the line and not stepping on anybody's toes, but some people maybe were not as careful. Yes, there were people who were like, it's an attack from China against the United States, it's World War III. That's not what I'm saying right now, and I never said that, and I probably never would say that. I would even be skeptical if our government came out and said that. I'd be like, really? I don't think so, because it's this mix of scientists in this international lab doing, but at the same time, the
reason
social media wasn't just attacking people who were saying stuff like that, like really hyperbolic, over the top stuff. Social media was attacking anyone who even discussed it. And that's what's really crazy. They'd search for keywords. If YouTube's algorithm might be searching for keywords.
I'm sorry for a little bit. Now you're talking social media, so you're talking the cancel culture.
Yeah, talking cancel culture.
Oh, okay. I'm not. You're not when you're talking about. I guess I focused on the word media, and I was thinking in terms
I'm talking about
the news
Facebook
media
and
things
Twitter.
Like that. Oh, okay.
And they were just kicking people. They weren't just shutting down their posts and fact checking their posts. They were kicking them off. You're out. You're canceled.
Now that
And-
was Twitter kicking them out.
Yeah, that was Twitter or Facebook or Google Google is probably one of the most insidious because people say, "Oh, just Google it." But when you're Googling it, one of the things that Google curates those results. I mean, it isn't like back in the early days of Google, like very early Google, where it was just giving you raw results. They don't do that anymore at all. They curate the heck out of it. They show you official sources, whoever that is, and it's the same. 200 colleges or 30 media companies, and if it's not one of those, it gets deranked.
Yeah.
And which stifles discussion, and I mean, this is important. I mean, all right. So one of the things that's been fact since the 60s is that military organizations have always been afraid of coronaviruses, and the reason why is because coronaviruses spread so quickly.
Oh, sure.
So if
Wipe out
you're a
the army.
military organization and you can do genetic engineering, and you wanted to create a superbug that would just wipe out a population, your go-to virus would be a coronavirus because it spreads like this. Now there's a disadvantage to coronaviruses, which is they mutate really quickly. But it also could be, in a weaponized sense, it could be an advantage because it would immediately mutate.
Well,
it would just kill off half the population and then mutate.
Well, like
and would no
COVID
longer be
did at this
dangerous.
point, where it mutated to the point where what was effective was no longer effective against it.
So this is like the extra level of bonkersness of this censorship, because the military had been at least the United States military, most foreign militaries too, they were talking about this as a existential threat to civilization for 50, 60 years. And everyone's done, oh, that's not even possible. What are you talking about?
Well, that's why international
That's like 2 generations.
international law, which may or may not be paid attention to, banned germ warfare, which is essentially the same thing.
Right, of course, right. But the thing is, the tricky part, of course, is if it's super effective, you don't need to drop bombs. You just need to infect one person, like the movie 12 Monkeys or something. You just go on a plane and here, sniff this. Okay, the world's infected. Now it's a pandemic. So anyway, I just really cancel culture is. I'm fairly convinced that cancel culture is really. Have you heard the expression "the walled garden"? So
The what? The walled garden?
Yeah. So that's what they use. We have something. Facebook, and Twitter, and Instagram, and I'm trying to TikTok, and they're all walled gardens. So when you're on that website, you're in that website. All your followers, all your likes, all your content is in there. And usually they have explicit, they have either technical or legal or both restrictions preventing you from getting in there unless you go through their gate into their garden. Right? Those are their walls. And this is kind of the architecture that just evolved due to technological circumstance in the zeros. And like one of the things with MySpace, and one of the reasons it failed is it wasn't really very well walled. It was unwalled, and so they switched to that wall. And I think cancel culture is actually a side effect of those walled gardens protecting their content. So basically, when we think about, because you'll see people do it to each other, right? You'll see people like, I don't like your politics, and they'll attack you. They're actually perpetuating a corporate culture for these companies that don't want to, people to even think about the possibility, like what I was saying with that beeper app, where you can look at all your apps at once, that you can do that. They don't even want that to be in your consciousness. That's a problem for them. That messes their business model up.
Sure.
So
they got a wall, and they want you to stay in it.
Right, exactly. So.
And they want to make it a lot of trouble for you to get from there to another walled place because you'll stay there.
Right, and so what ends up happening is the economics start looking like that. I'm sure you'll appreciate this. The company store with the coal mines, right? Where you're a coal miner and you don't have the financial wherewithal or the time or the resources to go to another store. So you go to the company store and they just keep jacking up the prices, and they can totally toy with your entire life.
And they put it on your bill.
Yeah.
And that's a total control.
Yeah, exactly. They control the entire economy, and that's kind of what's happened. And that's cancel culture is trying to discourage people from thinking about the fact that, hey, maybe I'm getting jacked here.
So in other words, if you don't want to worry about the cancel culture, you just stay out of all those walled enclosures.
Right.
And then you don't know what they're saying, and so it doesn't bother you.
But the problem is, in the modern world, that means you're out of everything. You're not even.
I'm out of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and maybe that's a better. And then, look, I mean, it's the running joke in the tech industry is I'm just going to move to a farm. I've had it, and there is I'm just going to be a shepherd. I'm going to go sit in the side of a hill and watch my sheep.
Well, you actually can do that right in the middle of Flushing. But anyway,
yeah. And there's definitely a lot of chickens lately.
My daughter-in-law's got chickens, but they're way out on the island. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's there is always, well, as a principal of a school, you know that virtually every decision you're going to make, there's going to be some who don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
You just accept that.
Right.
However, if you're in a walled enclosure, and that is very important to you,
mm-hmm.
and you start getting, you don't count, well, that's only 5% of the people, even in the walled enclosure. It's just that hits you, and mm-hmm. It affects what you think and how you feel about yourself even.
Yeah, and and I think that this is because those walls are made of that technology that most people don't understand. They don't even recognize that they're trapped, or that they've trapped themselves by investing so much in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they let you homestead inside their walled garden, but then your home is in their property, and they make it's like you just woke up one day and there was a homeowners association and they had a whole bunch of rules that you don't like, and guess what? You ain't moving. You're stuck with them. It's like you didn't sign up for this. You didn't even know. So yeah, it's insidious. Anyway, so that's that story. Also, this is kind of
not through the news.
Well, one more, and we're out.
How long has this been now? 2 hours of the news. Sorry.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
You said half hour. No, okay.
Well, half hour we didn't talk, right? So that's the thing. This is a good.
I know.
This is a good thing.
I heard you.
Yeah, this is a good thing.
But then I asked you if I could say anything, and you said, "Go ahead." So.
I think some of the most interesting. Hey, Rich, working on moving to the farm. Yeah, okay, that's not a bad idea. See, you used to work in tech. Well done, sir. All right, well
played. Is that
played.
the Rich that's coming next week?
Yeah, that's the Rich that's coming next week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So the last story is otters gone wild. So apparently, pregnancy otters have been stealing surfboards on the coast of California. Well, actually, a specific otter has been doing this, and it's kind of created quite the kerfuffle. Apparently, the wildlife rescue, the Coast Guard, the state police, and even the Santa Cruz mayor has come out, and they're all trying to catch this otter. So what happens is this pregnant otter's got a little. It used to be. They think it lost its fear of humans because it was a rescue, so it was in danger. So they rescued it, raised it, and then put it back in the wild. But now it's not afraid of people anymore. For whatever reason, it's taking a liking to surfboards. So it will steal surfboards from people and ride the surfboards. So you have this weird dichotomy where, like, all these law enforcement organizations are chasing after an otter, and like literally people will be on the beach cheering the otter on.
Sure.
I mean, it's just, and I mean, it's gone so far as the Santa Cruz mayor has said that he is Team Otter. So it's almost like the plot of Jaws, but with an otter. And
the only people upset are those who have the surfboard stolen from them temporarily, anyway.
I mean, it's a very ornery otter. So anyway, I said it's kind of funny because we just had a story a few weeks ago, and of course, like people hear the anecdotal version of this and like, it's the end of the world, all the animals are going crazy, but like it was a specific problem in the Mediterranean, orcas. There's a pod of orcas.
Just off the coast of Spain in the Atlantic, wasn't it?
Right, yeah, that are attacking fiberglass boats and disabling them.
Actually going after the rudders in particular.
Yeah, go ahead. So they're smart enough to figure out, this is how it turns, and they rip it off.
Well, they're trying to figure out what happened. Apparently, their guess is that one ran into one by accident,
mm-hmm.
and somehow that got lodged in the brain, and so then they decided that's what they should do. And then they taught others to do it, because that does happen among orcas.
Right.
They teach each other a lot of things. And so, it just became a big thing to do.
Yeah, so now,
without necessarily the thought of trying to hurt anybody, but just this is what you do. You run into these things and destroy them
Before they hurt you.
Well, I guess that could be. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't even know if there's
But
a lot. It's that
well, I was just
logical.
going to say, I think the otter story is much more fun and enjoyable than the orca one.
Oh wait, hold on a second. So we got helicopter. We got Jennifer saying helicopters are also
I forgot about that. So they also have helicopters. So it's boats, helicopters, the Navy SEALs.
I don't know if that's actually true, but yeah, and she's saying the Red October. That's definitely not true. But I mean, it's just crazy.
It's like the whole freaking state has gotten crazy after this one otter. So
it's not really science, but it kind of is because it's.
Well, I think it's funny.
It's
It's one of those
animals.
news stories that you enjoy, and
Right.
it doesn't come with any kind of either political or anything negative in particular. It's kind of fun. you know?
So if you enjoyed the Dystopia Report, which we are now leaving, please consider giving me a like, love, share this podcast, and don't forget, if you're not subscribed, to subscribe to the show and to comment. And by the way, I have no problem with time shifting. So if you watch this later, well, I know you're kidding about the Red October. I didn't think Sean Connery was arguing with an otter, but
yeah, but I think there are actually helicopters and drones involved. But
I wouldn't doubt it. We
It's
got them on
cra-
Long Island. Why not out there?
How much money are we spending? Is California spending on this otter? Anyway, it's utterly ridiculous.
Some really important person had their surfboard stolen. and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why.
Well, all right. So apparently the otters like colorful surfboards. So I was just like, oh, if you're
Better
angsty and you
yet.
have like a monochrome surfboard, you're safe. You know.
No, do they steal them off?
So kind of
off
all
the
like
beach?
the introspective surfers are okay. It's,
Okay, now I
it's the
got
happy
do they
ones.
steal them off the beach and drag them out?
No,
Or do
they knock the surfers off the boards.
That's what I was curious about. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Not
knock them
they.
off, and then they take
just she.
Yeah, just she.
I mean,
she knocks them off the
otters
boards.
are fairly good size, but they're not as big as a surfer.
The sea otter. Well, I guess they don't want to
I
argue with the otter.
I assume that it also sneaks up on them a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like a surfboard's tippy enough that she can tip them off, and then climb on the
I hope
surfboard
my
and surf.
wife is listening. She loves otters. She thinks they're adorable.
I mean, this is ridiculously funny. So I mean, I want to like. I get why the people are yelling on the beach. You know, I mean, you know what I heard when I heard this? I heard the Benny Hill music in my brain. You know, just the cops running around and like double speed after
sure
the
this
otter.
wasn't BBC. I mean,
Yeah. All right, so thank you so much for watching, and now we're finally getting to the interview part. So, what's your attraction to teaching science? How did you get into being a science teacher?
You want the real reason?
Yeah, shoot.
So I didn't have anybody else in the school to teach it, so I said, okay, I guess that's me.
Well, you're really good at it. I mean, I've been really impressed with your scientific knowledge, but also your ability to inspire the kids to want to know more. So
I had one graduate said, I thank Mr. Albert for making me love science.
Wow, see, that's what I'm talking
It
about.
only
That
cost
was-
me about $20 for him to say that, so
All right.
it was pretty cheap.
Yeah. That's scientific too. How much does it take? Just keep giving them money.
No, I did, and it was interesting. I mean, I don't know if he was just trying to come up with something to say about me, and that was the only thing he could think of, or whether it was real. But science. I don't know. It was, interestingly enough, I think I only took a couple of science courses in college, and didn't really follow up in that direction. Counseling, yes. Educational science, if you would, to some extent, but basically it just was something that, again, no other teacher did. This was years and years and years ago in another school, not the Lutheran school in Bayside, but and I said, okay, well, somebody's got to teach it. And then the teacher, who was like normally supposed to do it, said, I don't know anything about it, I'm not teaching it. I said, okay, I will. And it was just cool. I just started enjoying it and just worked from there.
Right. Awesome.
And I just developed it and wound up reading more and more about it. So I guess that's one thing I keep pretty much up on. Some of the in-depth physics can lose me. So
It loses everybody. There's no unified theory. So.
But I still try to.
There's no unified theory. Everyone's lost at some level. Yeah. So I think that's fair to say.
Well, the
I speak with
unified
authority.
theory, by the way, is very much under question. But
Yeah, no, there is none. There is-
then it
there-
comes
there's-
back
no,
again.
there's
No,
hardly-
there is one. But anyway, okay. So so that's basically what it was. And so then when I came here, it just kind of automatically kind of fell into. Nobody else wanted to do it.
Right.
I did hire some science teachers along the line for a while.
Okay.
And I taught other subjects. I always taught. So you can do that in a parochial school. The principals in a public school just couldn't.
Was there a
even if they
subject you
wanted
liked
to.
teaching better than science? Was there something that you were like, oh man, I wish I was teaching that instead of this? Or is that like your go-to?
I don't know. For a long time, I suppose it wasn't really necessarily a choice. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And then I got to like it because the more you get into something, and again with anything, the more you teach, the more you teach something, the more you feel like you're confident in it. You know, the concept of kids teaching other kids is really a brilliant idea because you learn more from teaching them than being taught.
Right, right.
So anyway, and I found that to be true for me.
You don't really know something till you teach
And
it.
it's that and religion. Again, both of those things, you know, I consider, well, I guess I comes down to the worldview, since I certainly do believe in God as the creator God, I look at science as discovering what he did and how he did it.
Mm.
And the more we know of that, the better it is for human beings. It
Right.
can be. Of course, it also goes the other way because science, as with technology, doesn't
Right.
have by definition, it doesn't have a morality to it. It just has the experimentation and the learning.
Right.
Okay. So anyway, that's, I guess.
No, this is. I think you can kind of sense where I'm going with this. Where I'm going to.
Well, go ahead. Keep going. Keep going. Go ahead.
So first, I just want to read some of the comments. So we got Rich saying, "What happens when the leash tied to the surfer's ankle? And do they get dragged?" And we got two people saying that they want otters as a pet.
Oh,
They're their
that
favorite
has to do with
animal.
otters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So as far as like teaching religion and so all right, I'll tell you what I usually, I have everybody on the show. I've had like deeply religious people all the way to
Deeply unreligious people.
Deeply unreligious people,
I
like
just thought
almost
I'd throw that in.
militantly atheists,
Sure.
And one of the things that, I kind of like with the militant atheists, one of the things I'll say to them is I'm like, well, look, I mean, there's some people who have done the math and basically have identified that the odds that we're not in a matrix are, just because a matrix is more or less possible, the odds that we're not in one are like 1,000,000 to 1. Elon Musk has been very vocal on that. And of course, the odds that we're the only species in the universe are astronomically low, depending on how you run the numbers. And, how can you be so sure that God isn't just, God and the angels aren't just a super advanced a life form that's 1,000,000 years ahead of us, and we just don't understand the technology, what they're doing. And that doesn't, and of course, they have to concede, they lose, right? At that point, they're like, yeah, I can't. So,
Well, let's just take it one step further. There's no way you can define when things began. Or you can define, well, for a while, I'm not sure how, this is arguable, but 13.5 billion years ago, the universe began.
Right.
Okay, maybe. Okay. From a science point of view, it's always a maybe because science is always open to questioning itself.
right, we don't have another universe to create to experiment. So.
But, okay, so you have that, but what happened before that? There had to be something, or, in other words, there was no beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no end. So you say, well, the universe is arguably, it's finite.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big finite, but it's finite.
Right.
What's on the other side of it? What's outside of it?
Right.
And where's the end of that? Oh, and what's on the other side of the end of that if you say there is an end of that?
Thank you. Yes.
So
I completely
therefore,
agree with
you
that.
come
Yes.
back and say, now, why couldn't there be a God, something that we can't even conceive of,
Mm-hmm.
that decided to create our universe?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm talking about universe, not just our planet.
Mm-hmm.
So including in that universe could be many other, living creatures don't have to look or be anything like us.
Mm-hmm.
They have intelligence and creativity or however even you define that. But so why couldn't there be a creator? And science can't determine that because right now they can't even go to the full extent of our universe, never mind beyond that. So for science to say there is no God, it's out of their category.
Well, all right, so you get back to the whole controversy, the whole positive controversy for religion or faith when, they got to when the Big Bang Theory started becoming popular. But one of the things that they do mathematically to sort out the Big Bang is they say, oh, well, it's just all the matter in the universe condensed into a single point and then it explodes. But the problem with that is how How do we know that? We can't possibly measure that.
At the moment, they don't. There are theories, but that's. I mean, there.
It doesn't necessarily.
I wouldn't even call them.
infinite.
The word theory would be wrong in that case, but there are ideas.
Postulate.
Yeah, that
postulate.
a few scientists have thrown out.
Right, but I mean, I don't.
But even if
buy
there
the
was
idea.
something with energy and matter outside before that, still, that goes back to what? Eternity? I mean, how there was no? Was there a beginning? Was there no beginning?
I think the odds that there isn't Big Bang, pre-Big Bang matter out there that's outside of what we think of as our universe, that probably follows very different physical rules than we do, is basically zero. It definitely is. I mean, what are the odds
Sure.
that the breaking point where the singularity just suddenly explodes happens to be all the matter in the universe? It's just it's a shortcut. It's a mathematical
All the
shortcut.
matter in what universe? Our universe, or in
Exactly.
the unlimited universe,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
no-end universe, the infinite universe?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, so I mean, basically, I'll go back to an original statement, is that essentially science is trying to find out what God did in creating things. Now, of course, that's a religious way of putting it. I understand
right.
that.
Yeah.
But science is determined by trying to find out what's there, how it works, and whatever. But not necessarily the original why or whatever. Okay.
Right.
Now, so how does that work? Well, I guess one of your biggest questions comes down to almost creation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a Southern Baptist and you totally believe in absolutely 24-hour creation and everything in the Bible is literal,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then we're not talking there. But did you ever notice how the creation story in the Bible fits what scientists have come up with as their theory of creation? What was the first thing that I read that scientists' first thing that happened at the Big Bang was light. Oops! Oh wait, that's the same thing as in Genesis. Okay, and you just take those steps.
Mm-hmm.
If you take them from the point of view of a human being on the earth or
Mm-hmm.
from the earth, then even the concept of, did you notice that the Genesis count has plants being created first before the sun and the moon? He said, couldn't be. But if you're standing on the earth and the clouds are encompassing the earth thickly,
Mm-hmm.
it has to be plants first to clear the atmosphere so you can see the sun and the
Right,
moon.
to change the nature of the
So
atmosphere,
if
not
you are
terraform the
there
Earth,
now,
but just a ball of rock.
and then you have the only place I have problem is winged creatures along with sea creatures. But again, then we do have flying fish. I don't know what we had back then, but you know.
Right.
But even the order of those things. Now I question. I think we can safely say. I don't think we could safely say that the story of creation, as we see it in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
goes back 3,000 years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So 3,000 years ago, is there any possible way?
Come on, jump in here, people.
Any possible way that human beings could have envisioned the series of steps in creation to mimic what scientists today are saying were the steps in creation, as far as they can tell?
Right.
Do you see, now, there is a similarity in the Mesopotamian stories of Gilgamesh as far as creation goes. And of course, it would also be based maybe on the creation story that the Israelites or the Jewish people, as we would look at back, would know,
Right.
because it's the same culture. Okay, but other than that, is there any other story? I haven't run across any other creation story that makes any sense whatsoever in comparison to science. And this one somehow winds up actually following it,
Mm-hmm.
or science is following it. I just think that's amazing, and which says to me something, rather than there being a conflict between science and religion, or at least my faith in Christian religion,
Mm-hmm.
it seems to me it's almost saying it validates it.
Yeah.
It
yeah,
makes it, it's one of the
I see
strongest statements for the scripture being something to pay attention
I
to.
see that argument. So there's all right. So let me lay out some groundwork so that this conversation can go even further. So one of the things I actually just discussed this with some friends of mine, discussing the possibility of okay, what is the structure, like the rule structure of different religions? And so and the argument we were discussing how Islam is my postulate is that Islam is the only purely fundamentalist that's not religion that isn't problematic, specifically because there's a chain of custody for the holy documents from Mohammed to modern times. Now, that doesn't mean it's correct. It's just there is a chain of custody for what that is not true for the other monotheistic religions, which is the Old Testament and the New Testament, of course. Jesus and.
What do you mean by chain of custody?
Well, the problem is that we have literacy bottlenecks. We have chaotic times of conflicting churches, like before the Council of Nazarene. We have points at which that pieces of the Bible could have been altered or disrupted. None of this means that a God is in question. And I mean, there are some things in the New Testament are more verifiable. Like, there's multiple sources for some of the stories of Jesus. Like, not only do you have the main forming books, and you have other books verifying them too, but there's other historical documents saying, yes, he said that, yes, he was here, yes, that happened.
Just let me go back to the Muslim example there for a second.
But you see what I'm saying about the chain of custody being
right,
an
of course,
issue.
you are including that there were additions to the Quran. Part of the Quran was added well after Muhammad.
No, I'm not including that.
Okay, well, yeah, some of it.
I'm not referring to that.
Some of it was created or written by his followers. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
It's not quite as tight and pure a chain as you were saying. That's
okay. Interesting. Okay.
Okay. Now again, I'm not quite sure that a Muslim believer would agree with that. Okay. I'm using other sources in my readings too.
Right.
And of course, there is a great deal in the Quran that is based on both Old Testament and New Testament writings.
Right, of course. It's constantly discussed.
And of course, it was almost a militaristically chained, if you would, or controlled thing.
Right, yeah, agreed.
Which most of the other religions, any of the other religions.
I mean, the problem with Christianity is it's so chaotic they had to have the council, because it was
a number of councils, actually.
Yeah.
The Council of Nicaea is what you're talking about.
Nicaea, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah.
My apologies.
Yeah. Well, of course. But that is also understandable. I mean, Christianity mixed with the Greek philosophy, and it was basically Greek concepts that came into Christianity, which was pushed aside by, I guess you'd say, Jewish Christianity? Well, not necessarily, but I always remember St. Paul was partly Greek, Roman, and Jewish.
So this is one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because, all right, so I actually have used the word. So I have a group of novel scientific theories about the conscience and humans evolving from psychopaths and psychopathic behavior, and how developing empathy was actually a genetic advance and an advantage for human beings, and it was actually the foundation of civilization. So that's neither here or there. But one of the things that grew out of that was this view that, so when we have insights in our subconscious or our conscience, which is the same mechanism, we actually come to know something that we don't understand how we knew it. Where did that come from? We have these flashes of insight, and it can happen to a student when they're stuck on a problem. You go to bed, you wake up, and you're like, aha, I know how to do it, or eureka, and but it can happen to a scientist who says, I know how this works, I just can't prove it yet, and will run endlessly for years doing experiments to prove it, to get to that point. That's a faith. That person has faith that information is correct, and they don't have proof yet. So, and one of the things that's interesting about religion is that it is faith-based, and the way this all ties together is when one of the things that we may be heading towards, you asked an interesting question before about AI, when does AI have rights? If we are able to create an intelligence, a generalized artificial intelligence that can actually solve whatever kinds of problems are presented to it. Let's assume that for some bizarre reason it isn't smarter than us. It probably will be, which is terrifying. But let's say that doesn't happen, and it's on par with us, and a comrade, comparable, and that there's some natural limit to intelligence and the way we're thinking about it, and that is honored. Wow, that is going to test our faith, right? That's going to test our ability to know something like, oh, there is a higher order to things that we're encompassed within, because we just stepped outside of that order. You know, and this has happened before. I'm sure some people lost their faith the first time a nuke went off, right? Speaking of Oppenheimer.
People have lost their faith through all sorts of things.
Yeah. I mean, people lost their faith. Man, I just lost the bet at the track. Man, there is no God. You know, right? Of course.
Right.
But whatever faith
By
it
the way,
is,
they've also
it could,
gained faith for things like that too. But okay.
You know, but the word faith is really interesting. You know, because I talk about faith all the time on this show, but I'm not necessarily talking about religious faith, although that is included in it too. You know, knowing something you can't prove.
Okay.
So, you know, when you get into that chain of custody thing, you know, you look at Protestants where they're like, okay, we interpret, you know, not all Protestants, not all the time, but some of the Protestants for sure are like, okay, I just interpret this version of the Bible to this part of the Bible to mean this to me. I'm going to go debate it with people and come to my own conclusion. The Catholics are like, no, we have the answer. You will follow our answer. But is that really faith? If it's centralized, if there's a centralized hierarchy like this. I'm talking about, you know, not in school, but when we're past that, we're in the adult space and we're trying to find our own paths for ourselves. You see what I'm saying?
Well, I'll hit that first, then I want to go back to another basic question.
And I'll wrap a bow on it if you get stuck.
Okay. What can I say? We've talked about how science, technology can go good, can go bad. Okay, human beings. In the Christian faith, we use sin, which is going against what God would want us to do.
Right.
And God would want us to do things that more or less go along with conscience and good things for other people.
Conscionable
I'm
actions.
just going to generalize that right now with being anything more specific.
Right.
Okay. Well, just because it's part of the faith community doesn't mean we don't screw it up too, because of the same reasons within the community. And I would have to say the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church, my Lutheran Church, you know, the Southern Baptist, probably God's saying, oh man, you all screwed it up. You missed the point here, you missed the point there.
Yeah.
I really don't see that we've got it nailed down.
Well, that's part of that nature of sin.
Right.
Is that you
have to admit that.
Yeah.
I want to flip back to creation, okay,
Mm-hmm.
again, because it talks really where you're going to some extent, where you were. Okay, you have human beings, Homo sapiens, who would be physically very similar to what we are, except that they're intelligent animals. Okay, it's amazing what a dog can learn and can do, but it's always only learning what it can physically. It has emotions too, so its emotions and its physical environment are what it knows.
You nailed something there.
Okay,
I'll
now
come back to that.
there seems to be sort of an agreement that physical human being who was just an intelligent, and I'm going to use the term animal here, there all of a sudden came a point where there was a transition into now having the ability to visualize and imagine things that were not physical things in front of them. They could imagine the possibility of a different kind of animal than they've ever seen, which they couldn't do before. They could imagine artwork having a meaning, things like this. And it does seem to be agreed that there was a point in time where that happened. And I would say, Adam and Eve. Okay.
Right.
All right. And that after that, and one of the things that they could imagine at that point, of course, was a God. And of course, if you go back and you look at all the burial rites all of a sudden that came about, you know, does that say something about an afterlife even? All of that was imagined. A dog can't imagine that. A chimpanzee can't imagine that. We don't think a porpoise can, but of course we really can't get into the mind of a porpoise that well.
Right. It's so alien, we couldn't even know where to start.
More alien is the octopus, but anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but it only lives 2 years, so what the heck?
Yeah.
But long and short of it is, so you have this new ability to communicate with God, which I think is interesting because, well, we could go into a lot of stuff there, but that's where I think we come into both conscience, which is basically God saying, this is what I want you to do. And he worked on that basis up until, let's say, Moses, okay? And then he said, okay, first of all, people have come to think of gods as an area god. I'm not an area god, but I got to have a people who's dedicated to me or I'll get washed out of the water. I'm not saying, so this was his way of doing it. And so he created his own people.
Let's just accept free will as a necessity.
Oh, free will is what we've got. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So like that's what validates what you just said.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you set a set of laws instead of just being a conscience, which, going by scripture anyway, screws things up pretty much rather consistently because we don't follow that conscience.
Mm.
Anyway, and so then I think the next step was when the world became literally an international thing, thanks to primarily the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden it wasn't just something based in one area.
Mm-hmm.
Then I believe God took the next step and sent Jesus into the world.
Right, right. Okay.
Who was now international.
This is no longer going to be a conversation between groups of people. This now needs to be an idea because it needs to be able to travel the world as an idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Valid. I see
You
that.
want to go further? I love the idea of the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
And again, timing, even in the Bible, the Bible in two different places clearly says a day is like 1,000 years in the sight of God. I mean,
right.
Timing with God, and I don't think the Bible...
It's clearly a secret decoder ring.
I don't go by years because they didn't count years. They didn't count birthdays,
Yeah.
So, okay, so you have the Garden of Eden being a wonderful, what do you call it?
Walled garden?
No. Actually, it was a life of luxury.
Right. Like a utopia.
More so.
Right.
What do you call it? Hunter-gathering. Hunter-gatherers really
okay,
have
got
an
it.
easier life than, which I think was perhaps a sinful kind of thing to develop farming, which now meant, by the way, and then it is interesting even in Scripture how, now I don't necessarily think that Adam necessarily had to farm himself, but there could have been many tens of thousands of years before they actually came up with farming, but in the long run, now he's fighting the weeds of the ground, which is what Scripture says also is going to be his big problem.
Right.
Okay. All right. So there you have, etc. So I mean, I just
Right. Well, of course, later you get into the wheat, separating the wheats from the tares. And you have to wait till the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it says that in the farming is going to be the big problem. But then later on, it's like, well, solving the problems of farming is accepting that you can't solve all the problems as you go. You're going to have to solve. You can't solve all the problems on the spot. You may have to solve them as you go, and when you reach a conclusion of your task.
Certainly, we're talking about that with anything we've talked about. We're still in the middle of all these changes. I mean, let's face it. There's no question in my life, and actually even more in yours, and more in your son's life.
Yes.
Either son, there's more changes per minute
It's
in the world.
Agreed. It's totally
tremendously.
accelerating.
So and so how do you
here's an interesting thing. Like
how do you pull it apart?
You could just take some of the technologies now that we're seeing now and just bring them back 100 years, and they would look like magic. And this is
back
like
50 years, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, and so
my lifetime.
There's a really great science fiction quote. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And so.
Well, why didn't God send Jesus now? Because we wouldn't have believed it. It would have been all.
They were like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. I've seen that before.
I didn't get enough hits on TikTok. Oh well.
Yeah, you got it. I mean, yeah. Okay.
Right. Well, so now we're coming full circle. Now you see what I'm starting to get at here. So one of the things that the idea that I'm peddling, I guess, is that faith in and of itself, yes, faith in specific things is better than just faith in whatever, but having faith in things that, seeking faiths that pan out has a value that is going to be like the last frontier of, say, AI.
Can AI have that? That's a good question. I mean, I would say faith is just an example of being able to imagine things that are not concrete in front of you.
Right.
Granted, a running deer is not concrete, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah, I think that's just one step of it. Yeah, it shows up in our everyday lives all the time. I have faith that when I get on a plane to fly to Vancouver coming up in August, that it's going to work and it's not going to collapse in the middle of the air.
Right.
Okay.
And that's and you could argue that that faith is both maybe part of a better grand design. That there's been a long series of there's a few decisions made in the past that have turned into a long succession of successful civilizations that have gotten you into that plane, that got you into the air, that got you to Vancouver.
Still a faith, though.
Yeah, right. But also,
you're imagining something that doesn't necessarily have to happen that way.
You can have faith that you understand aerodynamics,
right,
and a jet engine and hydrocarbon fuels and all that stuff. And you can have faith in the people around you that they're going to do their due diligence when they go to pilot school, and that they,
and my
show up not hungover to the air traffic controller.
open the door on the plane at 30,000 feet.
Right, yeah. And so, there is the thing that makes people is faith.
Which I would say would be and this is not creative on my part, this is something I read, it was somebody else's idea. Don't ask me whose, I can't remember those things. So, if you think it's mine,
text me and I'll talk about the show next week.
If you think it's fine, that's mine,
Yeah.
Is the concept of being able to imagine things that you don't have physically able to feel or see
right
in front of you.
All right,
so all of what you're saying fits that,
right,
as well as the concepts of God.
Right.
And the concepts of...
So here's a question for you. Now that we're kind of on the same page with faith, do you think learning when things that were faith become concrete, do you think that devalues your faiths of the past, or does it validate them, or both? This is not on my sheet, but I'm kind of this is going so well, I want to keep going.
Well, let's use a very specific.
That was true.
Well, let me give you a very specific example. Okay.
Yeah.
In the Old Testament Bible, again, at the time of Abraham, there's the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, and I know I read.
I actually talk about that story all the time on here because it's a very.
And I know I read years and years ago that there's a bunch of baloney. Mm-hmm. It's obviously made up, and all of a sudden they're finding glass in the ground.
I covered that.
Well, you and I talked about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Standing there.
But I covered it on the show before we talked about it, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I believe you. I'll give you credit for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. But I just was so amazed that here's a piece of evidence that says, there was a blast, bam, and timing. Well, you're not exactly sure when Abraham was, but they could time that, and it seems like it could have been about that time.
Yeah.
It isn't that far,
So if you don't know what we're talking about, I actually covered a story. They actually found the ruins of what was a small city or a large town that they think may have been Sodom.
The Sodom.
And it looks like what happened was a meteor smashed into it and basically...
Well, actually blew up above it.
Blew up above it, yeah. And it was so hot and so intense that it actually converted the sand on the ground into a specific kind of glass, and that's how they know that this happened.
And it is right, because it's only that kind of...
So it was like Pompeii, but with a meteor in the right space,
and it's in the right place at the right time. And again, so you say, well, does that prove the Bible is correct? No, but it is a little bit of fact to say, well, maybe it is. It's not completely baloney.
Perfect. So that's a perfect framework. So did that make your faith stronger or weaker in... Did that validate your faith, or does it does it take away from, oh man, now nobody needs to question whether this is true or not, they can just go look this up.
I would say, without
it
being a major factor, it would be a positive thing to the faith. A slight validation, I guess, because I'm saying, I think that, this is the Albert Simpley's way of putting it. And you have to be real careful with what I'm saying and not saying, okay? Mm-hmm. I think Scripture was essentially written, and again, wrong term, I guess a very technical term, but set up and had put down by God. Mm-hmm. And I also believe that he's kept it the way he wants to keep it through to today.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily technically fit with what other people think in that same way. Mm. Multiple authors, I don't see any problem with that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No.
And so on down the line.
We know people are failed, and I'm not saying there's probably, even if there's minimal errors, the odds that there are no errors.
Well, I mean, there's pretty
low.
There's one place in the Old Testament that I can't remember exactly where it is. It's in Kings, I think, somewhere, or Samuel, where there's a place name given to a specific spot, mm-hmm. and it is clearly known that place name was not the place name of that spot at the time of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it was put in later on.
Right.
What does that mean? If you believe in a literal translation and that
Does that mean
then you
that
got
God
a
isn't
problem.
real, or does this mean someone's a jerk?
But I'll go further. I'll just say, in the New Testament, there are many references and what seem to be quotations of Old Testament Psalms, bit in the Proverbs, odds and ends from the prophets. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Very few, a very minimal number of them are anything approaching an actual quotation.
Right.
Well, you have the problem of languages.
Right.
Okay? Excuse me.
No idea what's happening. I think it might be a roller gate, but it could be the
if you're
invasion.
talking about the Gospels, Jesus was talking to the people in Aramaic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the scripture was written in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those are basically two very different languages.
Right.
Okay. Then the scripture was translated after good old Alexander the Great, translated into Greek.
Right.
Okay. So then the Bible's written in Greek.
Right.
So you would think that the quotation that Jesus said would be the same as the Greek translation of the Old Testament. It's not. Okay. So
Yeah.
is it a Greek translation of the Hebrew?
Mm.
Not exactly.
Right.
Is it have the same meaning? Absolutely. No question about the same meaning. Okay? There's no place where you could say, boy, that got screwed up. No, the meaning is the same as the prophets or the Psalms or anything else.
Right.
The meaning remains the same. But
So-
it's not necessarily what we think of as always a direct quote.
Right. Of course.
Which means what?
Well, this is one of the things. This is one of the side effects of being so interested in the technocracy,
Mm-hmm.
right? You know, when I look, so let me just put it plainly because it'd be easier to dance around it. But when I look at Genesis, to me that looks like Star Wars. Angels, supernatural beings with flaming swords, lightsabers. I don't know. You know, the apple of knowledge. You know, taking the rib out of Eve. The Hebrew for rib is, curved piece, which actually, when you look at it,
It can have a few different meanings.
It could have a few different meanings.
The word rib does not really show up
Yeah,
there.
rib
no.
is just one of the possible translations.
Right.
It actually means curved piece from inside you, and that could easily be DNA. So,
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So was that a
Oh,
genetic experiment?
so wait a minute. Here again.
This is starting to sound a lot like,
Let's go back and say,
something George Lucas
if
put
we're
together.
talking, if we're talking about,
Doesn't mean it's not real.
if we're talking about human beings, and that one all of a sudden had the ability to imagine things beyond faith, okay?
Mhm.
What were you talking about? A DNA change?
Yeah. That's really
How-
far out there.
How many people can have that DNA change at the same time?
People weren't.
One.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So, a la Adam. Okay, so Adam is there, and then we're talking about God looks for a mate. Well, he's not looking at chimpanzees, snakes, or your otter.
Yeah.
He's not looking for them for a mate, but he can't even find them among human being women because they all
Right.
have that. So he had to create out of the DNA. I never thought of that one. That's good. So he had to create out of that DNA
Mhm.
a mate for
Yeah.
him. See, so I don't see, again, once again, we're saying, do we see a problem between science and religion? Do
Right.
I see a problem between science and scripture? No,
Right.
I don't.
Well, actually, so the interesting thing is there may even be a specific, what I'm saying is that, and this is something that, it may be that faith itself is actually the most important
Makes you human beings.
vehicle that makes us people.
Oh, of course it is.
Yeah, and
darn, we agree.
And exercising that muscle is
Well,
one of the things that God, or
Mhm.
that a super advanced alien from the distant past, had in mind for us, and I mean, it makes us sad to think that it isn't divine, but I mean, that, like you said, a super advanced alien from a distant past
Is divine as far as we're concerned.
right is divine as far as we're concerned.
If he
Agreed.
created the universe, that's divine compared to us.
Right.
All right?
Yeah, I see it.
Now, can I answer all of the things in the scripture? Like, how does Jesus make somebody walk? No, I can't answer all of those kind of things. On the other hand, then it comes into, you do have an expansion of what you believe. You do have the ability to believe some of these things could happen if you believe something created the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Then if you created the universe, I guess you could make somebody walk.
Mm-hmm.
if
Right.
you wanted to in a given circumstance.
Right, right.
So, you know, I again, it's from that perspective. So that's where I mash. You started off by asking religion and science. How do I mesh it?
Yeah.
And
Well, I figured
have
you
I
were the
given,
guy
have
that
I given
you-
you a decent answer?
You gave me a great answer, and I think that I appreciate you. I know this is it's a nervous topic because you don't want to blow it for people. You don't want to like crush people's faith or
Right.
ruin. I don't want to ruin your faith. You don't want to ruin mine. We don't want to ruin theirs. But at the same time, I think it's also a really important topic to talk about for the same reasons the technocracy is an important topic to talk about, because when you discover something, putting your faith in other people to get it right, putting your things that you previously just had to take on faith all of a sudden become fact. And how do I deal with that? And what does that mean for me? Does that mean that now it's just, an extended, is God just a government? Let's say it was, there was suddenly a rash of discoveries that were made a bunch of things that were previously taken on faith to be fact, and the next 10 years of the Technocrat Live is basically all the miracles in the Bible, and that's the technology that's coming out. But I mean, some of them, that has happened with a few miracles that have become technologies, and it's again, the important exercise was really exercising the muscle. It isn't necessarily exercising the muscle of faith and saying, oh, these insights that come to me are not useless, and I believe in my own ability to have useful insights, and I may never sort through them, or I may sort through them tomorrow, but that doesn't make them less valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And whether the source is,
So that you're
a risk engine in our
going
brain.
back to sorting the wheat from the weeds.
Yeah, exactly. Wow, that was a really great conversation. So I thank you so much for entertaining me with that. So how about that video I sent you?
We want to get to that. Yeah.
Yeah, we were going to get to that. So
So what was your question about it? Obviously, most of it
So I
was
wanted
just
to talk
the
about it.
scientific explanation of how a light bulb works.
Right. So it was a.
Are you telling them what the video is?
Yeah. So I haven't talked about this yet on the show, but
Right, you better
I
do that.
just found
Otherwise,
this
they won't
video.
follow you, whoever they are.
I
Besides Rich and the other people you mentioned.
Right. So we got lots of people. The majority of people time shift this show, so we do get people interacting in the comments. But we'll get 10 people watching it during
Right
the course
now.
of the show right now. But people are busy, right? This is not. We're not in the TV land anymore, right? Nobody's flipping, waiting through commercials and flipping channels.
Somehow,
they play it when they want.
I assumed if you invited me on here, we weren't talking about 10,000 to 1 million people watching. I figured that.
Well, no, I totally would invite you if it was a million people. I think this is it. I mean, I've had.
But you had no real idea.
I had no real idea. So I've had several people who are actively religious on the show, and I have discussed faith with them. And so far, I'm going to give you a huge compliment. This is the best conversation. So this is we've gone the furthest and got the deepest, and we got into the topics I actually want to talk about. Right? We laid the groundwork. It was good.
One comment. To a great extent, the thinking about all this happened when I realized that these kids that came out of Lutheran school and heard a lot about the scripture, and at the point when they graduated in 8th grade, they said, yeah, Bible is from God, and I believe in God. And then they probably went to a Catholic school, which sort of agreed with us without any big problem. Then they went off to college, and the college professors, who they looked at because they were well earned for their position usually, said, a bunch of bunk. Doesn't exist. Human beings came from, evolution, et cetera, by chance evolution. I'm not necessarily saying that God couldn't have created evolution also. But, okay. And how many of these kids wind up at that point saying, okay, on religion, on faith,
Right.
in God, because they were prepped to believe that it had to be literally accepted as it was.
Right.
Didn't understand, in my mind, how it could fit very well with science. In fact, validate science many times. And so that to me has
Or even
been,
crazier, science validating religion.
well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But that's of course not the basic theme of most students who go to college and hear the reaction of various professors on the concept of faith and,
Right.
and the Bible.
Well, I'll tell you,
From what I understand, I could be wrong on that.
I've
but-
never had anyone stand their ground on atheism. When I have this conversation with the Matrix versus the aliens versus, versus faith, versus aliens, versus aliens versus faith.
Now, when you're talking about Matrix there, now you're talking about that.
They were in a computer program and it's a simulation. And
Well, that's only one theory of.
Right.
And by the way, who created the computer programs that we are part of?
In that case, the admin would be kind of a god, wouldn't he?
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, thank
Outside
you.
of the universe of the Matrix.
But I do
Well,
think.
see, this is where they lose. It's like, all right, you're right.
But I do think that you can.
I just want to get them to say that I don't know.
I do think if you say I don't know what happened before, let's say the Big Bang,
Right.
and from there on out it's all been chance.
I'm very nervous
I
when
can
people say
believe
that.
that somebody could believe that.
Yeah. I get very nervous when people say I know, and then like when someone says I don't know, I'm much more comfortable with something big like that.
Sure.
Because how the hell would you know? What are you going to measure?
As I think
You got to start with a ruler.
what you have just been alluding to or saying,
Yeah.
and maybe I haven't been listening because I've been talking, but is the concept that being an agnostic or being a person who does not believe in any kind of God is a faith also.
Yeah, it is. It is a faith, and that's the thing that they don't realize. It's just a comically unaware faith.
Well, yeah. I wouldn't say comically. I mean, I take it seriously, but it's.
Well, no,
and
no,
I
no.
think it's a well thought out one too. There's no question about it. It's just that you're limiting yourself to the physical,
Right.
which almost goes back to what we were before becoming human beings.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, and we're just a series of tubes at that point. So the video that I asked you to watch was about.
Oh, I'm sorry. We went over that again.
No, it's fine. It was about the
My
Phoebus cartel.
Yes, go ahead.
And the Phoebus cartel is a cartel that existed in the 20s, having to do with light bulbs. And I thought it was a perfect example of the technocracy, and the risks and the dangers of technocracy. It is a proven conspiracy. So a bunch of light bulb manufacturers got together and said, okay, we want light bulbs to only last 1,000 hours. And a lot of people point to that as an example of corporate malfeasance in a conspiratorial form. And okay, so that conspiracy was just to create planned obsolescence, essentially to sell more light bulbs. And the reason, and there's a 20-minute video out there that's really good, and if you want, I can link it in the comments. Let me know if you guys want to see it, but I think I can sum it up pretty quickly, which is that it turns out that's not the case at all. It looked that way superficially, but it turns out it's kind of a technocratic decision, because it turns out that light bulbs, with through their various evolutions from Nate, pick your favorite star of the invention of the light bulb, to when they got kind of optimized in the 20s and the 30s, the optimal form for it is a minor amount of inert gas in a near vacuum in a glass bulb with a tungsten filament. And that tungsten filament is picked because it is the hottest burning metal, the hottest metal, the metal that can get the hottest before it burns, before it boils. And the result of that is you can burn it so hot that it actually burns and creates white light. And as you approach that white light point, as you approach the melting point of the tungsten, it gets to that white light point and it gets strangely efficient. In other words, you're using 40% less electricity compared to the light you're getting. You get a disproportionately higher amount of light output. So you're wasting less energy into heat when you have a hotter burning bulb. But the problem is, because it's sublimating, which is a version of boiling, we'll just look it up if you don't, we'll get into the details later. But essentially what's happening is there's little pieces of atomic tungsten falling off flying through the air and through the inert gas into the inside of the bulb and turning the bulb black, and eventually it gets so thin it just breaks. That's how a bulb burns out. So bulbs either last long or they run efficiently. And when you consider that bulbs are dirt cheap and cost $1, but the energy to run it inefficiently can cost anywhere from several dollars to hundreds of dollars, depending on how long it runs, it actually makes more sense to burn bulbs to burn out intentionally. That's a little bit of a complicated chain to follow, but it's simple enough that you can verify all that stuff on your own. It's a perfect example of why a technical consortium of people made a decision for the public and said, we need bulbs to last 1,000 hours because otherwise we're wasting electricity at a
You
grid
just
scale.
said, made a decision for the public.
Right, as technocrats.
And actually, it's a two-sided word for, the preposition there.
Mhm.
First of all, they made the decision because the public took whatever they came up with. So
Right.
you made the decision for them. On the other hand, there was a purpose to do it for the public's benefit
Hmm.
in comparison to just for the profit margin benefit.
Right.
So, sort of what you're saying is that not all conspiracies are necessarily bad. And before we were even talking about something,
True.
we're saying, now the bank's taking 3 days. Maybe there's a good reason for that. That actually benefits us.
Right.
But we just haven't thought of it, or we're not told that.
Right, right.
Because
So
they,
you
they
could
don't
say it
want
was
to
a
tell us
bu-
because then that would let somebody.
Everybody immediately defaulted to it was a bureaucratic decision, but maybe it was a technocratic decision
Correct.
in the sense of the technical part being
Correct.
security.
Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't many times where the cooperation between certain people is not for the benefit of the public that they're serving, not for the benefit of the people that they're hiring, but
Mhm.
they're only. I mean, I know politics, but is there any better example than the super wealthy Russians at this point,
The
whether they're
oligarchs, yeah.
military or private?
Yeah.
The ones with these yachts that could rival,
Naval vessels.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also, what's happening, of course, is Russia looking so stupid because they should have been able to walk into Ukraine and wiped it out within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But they're bogged down because how much money was stolen
Right.
and taken and put it? It seems like it was put into the pockets of these super rich people, and so what can I say? Yes, there is certainly many times where people, those who have the ability to conspire,
Hmm.
do it not for the benefit of the people that work for them or not for the benefit of the public at large. But then there's other times when
They do.
the technocrats tend to be a little bit purer on that,
Right.
although narrow in their focus.
So maybe because the decision making is performance based, whereas the bureaucrats, the performance is the written goal, whereas the technocrats is the measured goal. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Possibly.
It's kind of interesting. So we got Richard. You can't use spaghetti in a light bulb. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Rich says, as far as
Well,
I understand,
you can, but it won't last long.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It'll. You probably everything emits photons. So yes, you could technically create a spaghetti light bulb, but
Well,
you're not.
haven't
It's
you-
going to be very dim.
Sure, you can take some spaghetti and
Do you
light
need
it,
a
and
lot?
it'll burn and it'll be light.
Yeah.
How do you think they figure out calories? They burn it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
There's got to be light when they burn
That's
it.
true. Yeah.
And then, so as far as I understand, the steel companies put sanctions on the light bulb industry so they could not have impurities, so the bulb would burn out, so you could sell more steel. So that is the popular opinion, and it turns out it's because of the here's a counterpoint to this, and they actually brought up in that video, which I thought was excellently done. Which is that one of the things that the electric companies were doing, which are also typically the light bulb companies, they usually did both, is they would hand out free light bulbs because it actually lowered, if they handed out enough free light bulbs, it actually showed a measurable change in their bottom line by getting people to use 1,000-hour bulbs instead of 2,500-hour bulbs because they were 40% more efficient. They didn't last as long, but they're so cheap it becomes a negligible cost. So I was kind of accepting for the premise of this conversation that this is true. Maybe it isn't, and of course I'll listen if you say it's not. But so for the purposes of this conversation, so this begs an interesting question. Now, of course, when this country was founded, the United States is the kind of the shining light of democracy for the world. It's of course a republic, but of democracy, republic being a kind of democracy. Is democracy in jeopardy from people's inability to measure or participate in the technocracy? As technocracies, I mean, light bulbs are pretty simple, and we could talk about this for a half an hour, and that's why I like it as an example, because you can limit it to a half an hour, and you can kind of get to the meat of it, and you may disagree, but the arguments are all out there. But when you get into computer code, I mean, some operating systems and some more complex programs are millions and millions of lines of code, and many of those lines of code represent decisions.
some of those decisions may not have been made by a group of people. It may just been made by one programmer. And sometimes now in the world of machine learning, it may not have been made by a person at all. It may have just been made by random chance with data sets. So there's a lot of decision making in there. Are we reaching peak democracy here because of the technocracy?
Oh, well,
That's where I'm really going with this.
I guess I would have to say it's another time where democracy has been under fire. I mean,
Yeah.
there, I think.
I want to believe in it, you know,
There have been
obviously.
any number. I mean, just, you talked about another technology before that puts it under fire. Your box, your chat boxes.
Yeah.
Okay, that also does, because it definitely fires up one-way thinking, and people will think the way they're pressured into thinking.
Right.
And that's not exactly a good thing for democracy.
Right.
Okay, so
Kinda like the walled gardens.
are there technological stresses on democracy? Absolutely.
Mm.
By the way, don't those technological stresses also affect a a dictatorship kind of a government too?
Of course, yeah.
Oh, so all right, so it's not just democracy. It's stressing out the human way of existing, or human existence,
Yeah.
which we did sort of allude to also.
Right. Our ability to participate in our own existence.
Yeah,
Because if there's
because
enough,
if we can't understand what's going on,
if a lot of the rules that define our lives are just technical rules in a machine or inside of a computer program, you know, and those are defined outside of ourselves, and we're forced to live within their bounds, and we don't even understand them, or maybe not even aware of them.
yeah,
You know, you're not really participating. You're just
well,
in a
wait a
walled
minute.
garden. You're in a cage.
But on the other hand, democracy has rarely had a majority of people voting, even when there's simply just two candidates for something.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know this.
Mhm.
I'm going to guess that in the Greek cities, which were supposedly more pure democracy, which really had their limitations on democracy there too, but when the people came together to make a decision, was that a majority of the people? Oh, wait a minute. No, it wasn't, because the women weren't there, and the slaves weren't there, and if you didn't own property, I don't think you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sorry, so what was that, a democracy?
Yeah, no, not really, was it?
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know. So democracy is a tough thing, and it's a fight all the way through that supposedly gives people the right to expression and
so
somehow control their government.
So democracy isn't a state or even a system. It's more like just a big, long fight that you have to want to win. And then when you stop making an effort.
Oh, then it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So if you stop making the effort to understand enough technology so that you can have something to say or think about it, yeah, then you've given up, and
Right.
essentially giving up the fight to have some voice in your government, in controlling your government. Well, there are many people in the world who like that, would rather not make those decisions themselves, like it when a
Well,
government makes it for them.
I am definitely okay with the idea of somebody voluntarily opting out. There's no question that that's ethical. If someone's like, I don't know, I don't
Well,
want
that's
to know,
on an
I don't wanna
individual
learn.
basis, but
You know, I'll just
the
accept
difference
whatever
is,
you're giving me. All right.
You're saying, but you don't like the idea of when it's enforced so that you don't have an option to
Or
buy
when
in.
someone thinks, I'm helping, and they're not.
Oh,
And they think that they're informed and they're not, and they're doing destruction. They're doing
Are you
making
talking about me
destructive
again?
decisions. No, not
Oh.
you. Come on.
Oh, well, I'm
You're
sure.
fine. You got.
I'm sure.
I actually got to the end of that conversation with you. You're doing
I'm
good.
sure that
You like
there's
to
many
think.
times, though, that I think I'm informed and I'm not.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. I mean, so I guess maybe that interchange right there is it. You know, it's not necessarily that you're got it all nailed and you know exactly what you're doing. It's more that you're interested and you're determined to be effective and in effect.
Okay.
You care and you're engaging, which is
It's some sort of,
probably driven by the conscience at some level, right? It's like, I have
if
to.
we flow back to, isn't that sort of what Jesus wanted us to do too?
Yeah.
All right, I just wanted to, yeah.
I'll allow it. Right.
Yeah, I do think so, sure. And I think right from the beginning.
Right.
right? From human beings becoming human beings.
So
Yeah.
I'll tell you a secret. Like one of my tools that I use when I have a discussion with an atheist, and we're trying to talk about matters of faith. When it doesn't necessarily even need to be Christian faith. It could be like we could be talking about the Branch Davidians, or we could be talking about the Mormons, or something like that. But one of the tools I'll say is that, generally speaking, that may be an exception, but I have yet to find it. I never make an argument as a Christian that I can't also make as an atheist, because you can make all those arguments. You can use logic to support those things. You don't necessarily need to go to the words of the book, although they can give you hints and pointers that they are also independently verifiable through their own logical chains.
For example, love your neighbor as yourself.
Mhm.
Throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
I run into this a few times just in the last few days. Another, I don't know again how well it was done or how fully and carefully, but another scientific writing comes out saying that people who do things for other people are happier than those who don't. Now,
Yeah.
that's a quick Albert E. simplification, and I don't remember the real details, but essentially that's what it said.
Mhm.
And oops, love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm. No.
God says this is good for you. Oops, so does science.
Right. Well, also
Which is what you're saying to a great
I would
extent.
actually argue, even in it's a broad example, so it's hard to pin down. But I would say actually, people spend a lifetime verifying that.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So, all right, I'm going to ask you one more tough question. We'll dig into that, and then I think we'll call it a night after that. Is that okay? We got another question in you?
You're the one asking the questions.
I don't want to lose them, because they can't keep up with us. They can't keep up with you.
Come on.
No, serious.
Go ahead.
All right. So one of the things that I mentioned this before is that these companies, these tech companies. I mean, this is like fact. Like this has been demonstrated. There's been leaks and there's been minutes for meetings and stuff. So and I haven't actually been privy to this specific conversation because I'm not a developer. I generally tend to keep the computers that run the code the developers are writing up, but I kind of been adjacent to it, so I think I have no reason to think this is untrue. That that companies write algorithms specifically to make them more addictive. So I'm just accepting that as fact for the purpose of this conversation. But that's not the only threat to children, that addictiveness. I'm a little more forgiving when it comes to adults making bad decisions, because I think at some point free will matters, and people should be allowed to blow it, and make bad decisions and suffer the consequences and learn from that. But one of the things we want to do with kids is we want to keep them, as safe as possible, as long as possible, so they can learn things in little pieces. So their first lesson isn't a semi barreling down on them on an expressway, So the other risk for children on the internet and in the computer world is smooth connectivity. The ability to connect with anybody in the world, whether they're amazing or terrible, right? So which is a greater threat, the addictiveness of the algorithms, or the fact that you hop onto a web browser and next thing you know you're in the dirtiest, dingiest alley in the worst city in the world, talking to the worst person. That's a possibility simply by logging in, and joining it. This was a bigger problem back in the chat rooms of yore, of the 90s and the early 2000s, when there was absolutely no curation whatsoever. But at some point we went from no curation to way too much. So where is the balancing? The curators are hooking us like it's a drug, but then again, no curation is kind of madness too, because then anybody can do anything, and sometimes it's really bad. So what's the bigger threat, or how do you balance those threats as far as keeping kids safe?
So technologically, curation is not by itself a bad thing.
Right.
Okay.
So creating a system of authority, okay, where we have this this group of trustworthy people, and this is a particularly trustworthy person because he's got this credibility and has these this kind of accreditation and this kind of credibility, and you know. But at the same time, you know, you create that system and you can start to kind of push the envelope a little bit. You know, when is someone when is the accreditation system gone too far? When does the accreditation system have a different set of priorities? Like a good example is religion. A lot of people who are religious are angry that they feel that religion is not only not, you know, like it's understandable. You can argue it either way, but there's understandable arguments where people are saying, oh, you need to keep religion in the schools. Obviously, I don't think that, but I can understand why separating church and state does have some virtue. But at the same time, you know, there's people who've argued it's gone way too far, and you can't even be religious and be in a school. You know, that that academic structure has gone too far. You know, that they've gotten too aggressive, and they're treating all religion as if it's cult. The cult is very easily definable as something that's not religion. You know, the first and foremost being, you can't leave a cult. You're going to leave a religion. You know, so you know, so where is the balance between, you know, abuse of you know, protecting? Because the kids have to take those baby steps into technology, and of course most people don't understand it. So is there like some kind of framework that we can create to keep kids safe on the internet, but not too safe? You know, expose them to a little bit of danger. You know, yes, you might get hit by I don't want to say any kid to be hit by a car, but you might get hit by a car on a side street, but that's better than being hit on the expressway. Because on the expressway, you're definitely going to die. And in a side street, you might just get knocked off your bicycle, maybe get, worst case, your leg broken, but you're not going to die. You know, you know, what's the right amount of danger, right? Oh, any danger is too dangerous is not a good argument. You know, right?
You're talking about a balance.
Yeah.
You know, to be absolutely perfect.
This is such a hard question.
You're walking down, you know, the ridge line right at the top, and any movement either side is negative.
Mm-hmm.
How do I define that? You can define that maybe because you're into technology. I can't define because.
So you think it's a technocratic discussion
of
the
well,
details?
Exactly. Well, because let's put it this way.
How does the machine
Hold
work?
on a second. You've already defined that by what you're saying, that both sides have negative consequences.
Absolutely, yeah.
So therefore, yeah, it becomes a technological question on how do you get down to the middle line.
Mm-hmm.
How can you finesse both
Right.
areas, both sides, so that you're down to a middle line?
Is
Of
there
course,
a bureaucratic element to this, or is it just technocratic?
bureaucratic, if you're talking political, there's a political bureaucratic element to everything.
Well, rules, right? You can like, so a lawmaker can make a rule. You know, you can make a good rule, right? They're not all rules are bad. Like, I don't know, poisoning your
No, but almost
like the Geneva Conventions, like taking a water supply from a population during a war is bad. Everyone agrees, more or less. You know, like it's a very simple rule.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a few good examples of very simple rules in religion. We don't have to necessarily go there because this is more nuanced and specific to now. But yeah, I mean, so you can make a bureaucratic rule that defines a framework within a technological rule can be made. But yeah, I guess
you've already alluded to the point.
But
There's opposing views on that, so therefore, your bureaucratic political answer is not so easy.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily keep up with the
Because
technological changes.
one person is going to say, no, the ridge line is over here on this side.
Because the feedback is, you actually answered this before in an earlier question, because you said I summed it up, but you answered it first, which is that the technocratic, the feedback from the technocratic process, you know, that getting the data, getting the results from the technocratic process inform how to define that line. And whereas the bureaucratic process,
just the same as with the light bulbs.
right? So it's got to be a technocratic decision.
Well, not finally.
Mm.
Finally, it's got to be you'll call it bureaucratic. I'd call it political.
Or is it? I mean, it's got to be an ethical question. But again, the problem is
but
these problems
ethics-
are so hard.
But ethics are not can be argued as to what is ethically correct. And,
Mhm.
you know, are those who feel that even children should have greater freedom to make decisions, compared to those who say, no, that we can't protect them from everything, but there should be some protections because their minds are not ready to make those decisions.
Right, right.
Okay, well, no, I mean, there is certainly many arguments out there for on those areas. So
there's definitely some milestones in science. You know, like one is the age of reason, right? You know, usually 8. You know, you can't really reason with most 6-year-olds. You usually can reason with most 10-year-olds. You know, something happens in between there where you can start to use logic and say, well, if you do this and you do this, what happens there? You know, so that is 1 mile. You know, so clearly the thing that you would do before the age of reason, the thing you would do after are different. You know, so it's got to be. This is one of the reasons I wanted to ask you this, is because thinking about the development of the mind and, you know, creating increasingly more dangerous, less safe environments to get proper feedback so the kids can get feedback for themselves without them actually getting really hurt, you know?
Just talking about that age of reason, I've not actually heard that anywhere, but I always, in fact, this is my own little theory. I did for a number of years teach 2nd grade, so that was basically 7-year-olds going to be 8, and I always found that, that was the first age where I could enjoy teaching because they could reason, they could understand.
That's it.
Okay, or a 1st grade class when I never taught it, but I subs for like a couple of weeks at a time when in emergencies, and they just couldn't do that. They couldn't do that. There was a difference. Also notice that there's a major growth spurt, both physically but mentally, in males, particularly. You know, I see it in the 7th grade juvenile boys. 8th grade, some of those boys are all of a sudden just maturing like crazy, and then there's a bunch that aren't. But by the time you get 9th, 10th grade, the mind also has changed, and they have a whole different concept of their life coming up ahead of them, which in 7th grade, it's fun and games, what can I do now?
Right.
And all of a sudden in 10th grade, it's, I got a life ahead of me, I got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment.
And girls kind of do that, seemingly, my personal, so I do think that there's somewhat of a genetic difference, but girls kind of do it a more of a slow continuum. I don't see
a smoother path. There's no.
I don't see the
leaps.
big break. You know.
Yeah.
So which means that as far as maturity and seeing life in general, I see, you know, females tend to see that sooner. I tend to see that more in the 8th grade girls than the 8th grade boys.
Yeah, I think there's a reason for that. Actually, it's funny. It's funny. We just melted into a different. Wow.
Oh, we could do that easily.
No, this is really weird because I was going to cover another topic. All right, I'm going to just go for 2 more minutes. I'm sorry. I said I was going to stop, but this is
It's your show.
really, really good. Really good. So I actually have a theory, part of that Civ gene stuff, that the reason that around the age of reason, the reason that reason happens, the reason that they reach reason, the point at which they reach, the purpose of reason, there we go, is it's the beginning of the slowing of creating free archetypes. In other words, you know, young children can, like a baby will think about, like, is trying to figure out what gravity is, and that's why they throw cereal on the floor. Or, you know...
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just like, what happens if I throw this on the floor? Blink?
No.
Oh, okay. Like, they they may not have known that was going to happen. I mean, maybe not every time, but the first time for sure. They didn't know.
Oh, I agree they didn't know, and that they may have learned from it. I don't think they threw it on the floor to see. Well, I don't think they did it as a scientific experiment.
Well,
I think they did it as an emotional reaction to something.
Well,
yeah.
maybe they. But what happened, regardless of why they did it, right? It may not have been a logical A, B, C, D, E, but they did it, and then when things leave, when things are high, and then nothing's holding them up, they fall.
Including me.
And including me, and it becomes an archetype, and that's one of the concepts that makes up. And it's actually funny, in computers there's this thing where what you can do is you can take a data set, like let's say you had you use Excel, right? You used a spreadsheet to fill things, you know, like I don't know, maybe to make an address book, right? So you're using Excel or some other spreadsheet, and you make what you can. what you can do sometimes in programming is you can actually take like a literal data set, like one line of data, and that becomes the prototype that all the other data is. And you actually do it without realizing it in a spreadsheet if you've been using a spreadsheet for any period of time. Because I just taught someone I just taught someone spreadsheets, and this was like shocking to them, that the header line is just another line. It's just another row, right? It's just another row of data. It's just that row is the special. That becomes the prototype for the other rows.
Oh.
Right? So that's how I think our brains work. We create these prototypes for all these different kinds of ideas and concepts, and whether it's like math or language or motion or whatever it is, art and colors or and what happens around the age of reason is that starts to slow. And I think one that happens with boys is and this is the reason that they get potty mouths. This is the reason that they curse, is that some of the boys, for whatever reason, either genetic or environmental, get to the point where they can't really create archetypes as effectively anymore, right? They're starting to have to fill in the fields, right? At some point, you got to stop making new, adding things into the top row, and you got to start adding data into the fields about this is what's happening in my life, and it's not as clear cut because our brain is a spreadsheet, but you get that concept. And so as they become more logical, coming up with new concepts becomes harder. So sometimes what happens with some boys, specifically, boys are the ones with the potty mouths, right, at that age, around somewhere from 2nd to 6th grade is around where, usually by 6th grade it's stopping. Is there
really?
actually, well, not entirely, and here's the reason why.
It's stopping around adults.
Well, right, stopping around adults. But, so, what's happening in the mind is, what are those potty mouth words? They're usually body parts or bodily functions, or extremely aggressive concepts like kill, something like that, like something where and those words are actually, what they're doing is they're lighting up the entire brain in like a wildcard search. Because the thing is, if you're talking about an arm, right, or if you're talking about excrement, it's something that permeates every memory every day of your life. Like it's something that permeates every day of your life and a lot of your memories. So a lot of your brain lights up when you associate that. When you hear that word, it associates with a ton of memories, and basically what it does is it stops the brain from creating a new prototype. It actually shuts it down. So I think what's happening is that, and it's good that adults try to stop kids from doing this to each other, because what's happening is the kids who are no longer capable of prototyping, subconsciously, they're not doing it willfully, are trying to stop the kids that are still prototyping. They're actually trying to shut them down from creating more imaginary structures in their minds. So, and it's really weird that the conversation naturally flowed there. That was my whole point, is that, like, this is, there's some kind of identity here with figuring out where that line is and the age of reason.
Which goes back to your question of the constraints on
right, because
computer use.
Right. So the risk, whether you're talking about addictedness, which is definitely almost like a super negative event, like becoming extremely addicted to anything sets you up, I think, for other addictions. Because part of addiction is loneliness, right? Loneliness is always part of it, and versus the this idea that if you get shocked out of coming up with imaginary structures, you're not going to be as smart later, not effectively as smart later. So balancing between these two, between the rocks on one side and the monster on the other, right? Trying to find that line is the civic duty of humans, to do this in our children.
And the difficulty with that is you're talking about things that are not totally agreed upon as far as the changes in the brain and it's
Yeah,
the way it
agreed,
works.
yeah, I'm not.
Okay,
not-
so therefore.
We're in the
so,
weeds.
So right away, well, not in the weeds, I mean, you know, but it's not, it's first of all not thought of by most people who would be in decision-making situations.
Uh-huh.
I mean, parents have to think about it on an individual basis, but they don't generalize to the population. So if you don't have a general agreement as to where these various exposures online, etc., can happen, or what limits there should be, or addictive exposures, and you don't really have an agreement on that, or you don't have agreement on how the brain is changing, it's going to be difficult for even technocrats to come up with any kind of a line on that.
Yeah, agreed.
Now, I think...
One of the reasons to have the show is we gotta talk about this.
and we come down again to the science problem.
Mm-hmm.
The science problem is you really can't say something in science. Well, you can never really say something as a fact.
postulate stage here.
But it's in science, you have to have some sort of empirical data behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, okay, the Cheerios going on the floor become empirical because it always happens.
Yeah.
Until somebody has a fan in there and they blow the other way. But anyway.
Yeah.
But it's an empirical kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But where these things we're talking about as far as the human brain, it's non-empirical because we're not allowed to do those kind of empirical studies.
Well, of course, it would be terrible, right?
It's the same as medical
right.
industry.
We can just
industry-
wait for twins to do different things and hope.
Exactly, and of course that makes it difficult. So you're not only coming up with a really extremely valid question, and especially now that these forms of time that we spend our time on are becoming so much more important to the developing minds of children, but and it is increasing in speed. So no matter what, if we could decide today, it wouldn't affect tomorrow. There'll be new things that we'd have to decide on. But it's just so hard because you don't have an agreement on what's there. You don't have an agreement on the brain and what's happening in the brain. I mean, you and I already walked into dangerous territory by talking about there being a difference in the development of the male and female brain.
Yeah.
If you're in some of those boxes, my friend, we'd be dead.
There's women with body mounts and there's men.
No.
I'm just looking at curves and centers of curves.
I'm sorry. What we said alone.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind the religion part, but just
Yeah, I know, I understand
that
what you're
difference is going to, so you don't have enough agreement even among power sources in the society to really come up with an answer. It's a struggle. It's a great struggle. Parents almost can't do it by themselves. I still, how many times do you, there was one time a parent complained to me about how much time her son spent on the computer. And I said, take it away from him. And she said, I can't do that. Why not? It's his computer. But you're the parent.
That's not the reason.
But you're the parent. Okay? But she was serious and never did buy into my argument. Okay? Okay?
Well, because she doesn't even begin to understand this balancing act between the lurid and the addictive.
Well, actually, she was. Really, the problem was the addictive part of it. And she was saying there's something wrong with that. And my solution, though.
Yeah.
So therefore, what she was saying basically was...
He's out of his depth. Back him up.
But it's not her problem to solve.
Right.
She's the parent. Now that may be a little extreme.
Right.
I think most parents can.
I think a lot of parents, even parents of children of technical people, the parents just do that. They're like, I don't know what to do. They may come and give them a pat on the back, try to give them guidance. But it's.
A little story here. We had a young lady live with us for 4 years of high school. She was from another country, and the place. She had graduated from my school, so I knew her for a few years. And she was supposed to live with somebody who turned out to be an alcoholic, and her parents said, we don't really want her there. Where else could we put her? And so I had a space and whatever. She came to live with us. And the normal teenage kind of things. She got to her senior year. Halfway through her senior year, all of a sudden, no, 3/4 through the senior year, all of a sudden, something was going wrong. She was on her computer too much. She was literally... I'm going to use this term, addicted to games.
Well,
Now,
definitely games more than other apps.
I couldn't understand what they were saying, but you can tell by the tone of voice and, you know, how the interaction's going if I listen by the door, which, you know. And I said, it's not sex, it's not dirty, it's nothing like that. It's the game, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and talking with her, to reason with her, could not. So I shut down the computer, I shut down her access to the internet from my house.
Mm-hmm.
She got it from next door. And would get up after I was asleep and play her games all night, and the next day be not functioning
Destroyed.
correctly.
Yeah.
Well, the long and short of it was, talk about addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Her mother, I had a mother come over because there were limits to what I could do. And her mother came and basically forced her to actually make it through high school and graduate for that last part of the year, May and June, maybe just June.
Mm-hmm.
She went to a very high caliber college.
Mm-hmm.
And
Crush and burn.
I helped her move into her dorm room, although of course that was the only time I was allowed in there.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
No, you're not allowed in there. And because of student rights.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're a young adult.
I saw the connection to the computer right there on the desk. I said, this is not good.
Mm.
Yeah, by the end of October, she was kicked out. Had not gone to classes, had not done other things. See, I'm trying to make this as vague so nobody knows
Yeah,
the story.
no, it's pretty good. You did well.
And I don't think I've ever seen such a clear example of addiction
Mm-hmm.
where she couldn't control it.
Oh, I've known grown adults just wasted away.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and this was, and it caught me by surprise because you think of addiction as drugs, okay?
Mhm.
Or maybe some other things, gambling, you know.
Mhm.
Well, it wasn't those things. So, you know, it took me a while before it dawned on me that she had a problem on something that wasn't even called an addiction anymore. I
Mhm.
finally, after she went to college, I ran into an article where somebody was bravely saying that there could be such thing as an addiction to gaming.
Yeah.
And that person, I think, got shot down well at that point. But I said, yeah, somebody else agrees with me. But,
Yeah.
you know, and yeah, it proved to be.
Well, now it's fact. Now it's definitely
Oh,
fact.
sure
Yeah,
it is.
I mean, you can argue about when it's happening,
Right.
but it is definitely
But it
fact.
comes back to the question.
It's not
of
even just games.
Where and how do
It's
you?
even the adult
where
interfaces
and
these
how do you
things.
draw the lines? And I'll go further even and say, where and how do you draw the lines on adults? When a person's obsession or when a person's addiction is hurting other people,
Mhm.
where do you draw that line?
Oh, okay.
And
so
there we go, because
I
I'll
got
go.
an answer. I
Go
got an
ahead,
answer
what?
for that. So it was actually I just posted. I just had an insight about OCD, and I realized, you know, the OCD, you know, obsessive compulsive disorder for
Yes.
the audience, but specifically, obsessive isn't really the problem. People do get obsessive about things, and you can get obsessive in a positive way, like, hey, I'm building a hot rod. Hey, look how cool this is. Okay, it's done. You know, I'm obsessive about polishing it twice a year, but that's it, right? You can do that. It's the compulsion that's the problem. And the compulsion becomes a problem when you start affecting the people around you and hurting the people around you with your compulsion. And then there's feedback, and you recognize that you're hurting the people around you, and then you just keep doing it anyway. That's when it becomes illness.
So what do you do about it?
Well, right.
Does society have a right to step in?
Right.
I mean, let's face it, they closed down Creedmoor because it was decided society should not step in and put some, and of course it was done many times incorrectly or unfairly and whatever, I understand that. But
Yeah.
at that point, the decision was made, society does not have the right to take somebody with a mental illness, which could be an addiction, okay?
Or could be an advantage out of context in some situations.
Oh, yeah, okay. But with a person who's hurting other people,
Mm.
and you don't have the right to put them in any kind of institution or lock or in any way barricade them from hurting other people in the future because they've made the decision. Now, it could be made the decision not to take their medication.
Mm.
It could have been made the decision to continue taking the drug, which causes them to do violent acts.
Mm.
It could be any number of things. But is there a point where society should be able to step in and say, no, you're not supposed to do that?
Yeah.
I mean, really, because the guy.
I don't actually
the
know.
subway problems are many off.
You know why I don't
that.
know, even though I'm a technocrat? Because there's not enough data. Because we're moving too fast. We're way ahead of the data.
Which is exactly my point.
We're building
the
the
whole
machine
thing of
before
your
the data
question
comes
in the
in.
first place.
Yeah.
We don't have enough data on the human brain and how it functions and how it reacts to these things. We assume certain things,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it is. We don't have hard data.
Wow. I would love to continue this conversation again sometime.
Well, all right.
This
Invite
is-
me back.
This has been amazing. Your insights are timeless, and this was one of the better decisions I've made in my life. Having you on the show tonight, I have made some good decisions. So
Okay, we'll see what kind of feedback you want.
yeah, we can say let us know if you enjoyed it,
You
folks.
gotta say, "Please, never again. We don't want to see it." Like, oh, that's, I
Yeah,
understand.
well, you know, philosophy goes all places, and science is based in philosophy. People forget that. So,
Well, I guess we talked about human beings and there's all sorts of things.
Yeah.
We've just had very few conversations before tonight. Brief ones, standing in a gymnasium.
5 minutes, 10 minutes here.
That's it, you know.
Yeah.
And So, but I did look forward to this and felt it'd be fun.
I
And I
will-
felt it'd be because.
I will have you back on. Oh my God, this is great. I'll give you a rest though. I'll give you some time, and then I'll invite you back.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
And don't forget to ping me and remind me and tell me tell me what you come up with, and you know, text me, man. You know, if you have ideas, and I'll share some of them on the show. If you have to save the really good one for when you come on and be like, I've got it, Eureka.
Yeah. Well, let's see. What's the difference between an animal and a machine?
Yeah.
Oh, let's say, where do you get the basis between a dog and a AI?
One of the things that the geeks and the technocrats and the atheists like to joke around about is that we're just meat mechs. You know, we're just fleshy robots walking around.
Well,
know?
of course, you and I disagree with that because we say that whole idea, I call it imagination, you call it faith. That whole concept
They're
is
both.
something that makes us different.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we would say that's our answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
But what about even if AI becomes more intelligent than human beings and can handle the great number of variables a human being handles, is it any better is an animal better because an animal is natural?
Mm-hmm. But then again, in the AI too, because it's also going through its own gauntlet of experiences, just much faster in the digital world.
So therefore, if you destroy
it's evolved too.
If you destroy the computer that houses the AI, you'd be in as much trouble as if you hurt a dog.
Yeah. Well, there's a really great series on HBO called Westworld where they're talking about what happens when, AI specifically tied to a robotic form gets to that point.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Westworld, that was a series of novels too. Yeah.
Yeah, there was novels, and there was an old movie, and then now they have the HBO
See,
series.
I'm more of a reader.
It's
I don't,
a little.
I don't watch because
it's adult.
when I watch,
It's the old West
I am
raw
stuck
form.
there and watching.
Yeah.
And where I read, I can easily put it down and come right back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are things, if it's the old-fashioned DVDs, you can stop it and come back to it. But not most of the stuff that you see. Well, I mean, you can do that too with Netflix and stuff like that. But, what?
Good night, great show. And Ariel said, great show, and also said, a dog likes to eat paper towels. Yeah, that's true. That is a difference between a dog and people. We don't like to eat paper towels. Yeah.
Well, there are some exceptions to that, but okay.
All right, on that note, you're perfect. All right, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you for inviting me again.
I really appreciate
it. I gotta get my hand on you. Right, there we go.
There we go. Yeah, nice.
See, who's got a stronger grip? Now we'll play the old teenager.
Yeah, you win.
No, I'm 20 years old, 30 years older than you.
Yeah, I'm. You know what? To me, it's just about. I don't really like. I think about the handshaking ritual, and I like it because it's good because it shows you've got resolve and that you are engaging with the person that you're interacting with, but it does. I don't want to actually say that because I don't want people to not shake my hand, because I do want to do it, but I think that showing that you're using it at kind of the there's a risk of putting competitiveness over cooperation and coordination, and that's
that's just me right now. That was all because you've got a good handshake.
Yeah, thanks.
Many people don't. But no, on the other hand, I would say, wait a minute. When it comes to humans interacting with each other, there's always a physical element involved in it, or if there is,
Agreed.
It strengthens the interactions. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that.
I always, as a teacher, very careful with kids.
Yeah.
But
A pat in the back makes a huge difference.
shoulders, things
Yeah.
like that. That's pretty safe
That
territory.
little head rub,
Yeah,
you're doing good.
The head rubs you have to be careful on. Some kids don't like that, but you got. But there is our fear of touching has overruled to some extent almost the great benefits of human beings having a physical contact. And again, I'm not talking about improper physical contact.
I agree with you.
But and so therefore, handshake to me is one of the basic, non-improper kinds of ways.
Agreed. Oh no, I wasn't criticizing you at all.
So for me, it's an important thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and actually, so I'll even go one step further to back you up and to say, that kind of fear, that like prickly fear about touching, is part of the source of loneliness.
Oh, sure.
Which is part of the reason
Sure.
that we're having problems with addiction and we're so vulnerable to it.
Well, I don't know. The concept of loneliness and addiction being connected is a new one for me. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Or I hadn't read about it.
It's relatively
I'll think about that.
new, but a lot of people are having trouble arguing against it. Let's just say that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's no question that loneliness itself is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The connection between loneliness and suicide, or loneliness and mass killings. I mean, none of those things are all kind of like, okay, I think it's the same message over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's also the same thing for, what was it? Non-touching or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I have to think about that.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Paul.
Good night, all.
Thank you for being on.
Oh, thank you.
And please, if you enjoyed the show, like it, share it, tell other people about it. I mean, this show was phenomenal, and there's more coming here. And Paul will definitely be back. Please.
You're gonna double what you're paying me this time?
Yeah. You know what? I'll triple it. I'll give you 3 times as much as I gave you this time. Which is gonna be a lot of coffee. We're gonna be bouncing off the walls.
Oh! We didn't even break open a bottle of wine.
Yeah, we didn't. I was open to it, but
no, it didn't open.
No, well, I didn't open it. I'm open to it.
So you got to be careful. I could go in that direction too. Go ahead.
Yeah. So please subscribe, share, tell other people. Don't be afraid to time shift. I don't mind. And as usual, choose wisely, choose to share. Good night, everyone.
And good night.